Chapter 325. After haggling for a long time, Terenas accepted Duque's preferential package, only 1.6 million Arather gold coins per month. Half of it could be owed, the other half had to be paid in cash, and the rest could be mortgaged with precious art or precious gold. In exchange, Duque provided 300 FFF flamethrower teams, promising that as long as the flamethrowers did not die, he would try his best to repair the flamethrowers that were damaged under normal use, as well as provide all the fuel needed for the battle. Illugia did not understand Duque's approach. "Teacher, Duque, why are you doing this?" Illugia had seen with her own eyes how Duque twisted a valve under the tank that was about to release the finished fuel, and then a huge amount of fuel flowed out of the huge tank next to it. That flow made Illugia think of exaggerated words like a broken dam and a deteriorating river. Illugia blinked and looked at the strange square inscriptions engraved on the flamethrower gun. As long as the valve was pressed, the inscriptions would glow with a yellow magical light. Or is it that the biggest cost of producing the FFF artificial dragon's breath launchers are these mysterious inscriptions? Duque glanced at the inscriptions on it and blushed, which was a rare sight. Written on it were some Chinese characters, such as burn, burn, burn all of them. Die lovers. Traitors who betray the Single Dog Alliance must all be burned to death. This is Master Duque's original. Goblin pirated dogs, die. Duque coughed hard and put on a serious face. Well, those are anti-theft items. Once the inscriptions are damaged, it will affect the operation of the launchers. Of course, that's not the most important thing. Duque touched Illugia's head. "I'm very happy that you did not leak the secret of the dragon's breath launchers. Actually, I'm not just thinking about this war anymore. The war will end with the humans' victory. The only difference is how much we win and how much each country has to pay. So, I've already started planning for the post-war." Post-war? Illugia's eyes widened in shock. What a far-sighted plan. While the orcs were attacking like fire and the whole continent was still in a quagmire of war, when every human could not see the future clearly, Duque was already thinking of keeping the strongest alliance, Lordaeron, in check after the war. If this was true, then his father was not on the same level as Duque. Duque looked into the distance. His black eyes became incomparably deep, like the endless starry sky. It gave Illugia a feeling that she would never be able to see through him, but she would unknowingly fall into it. The big hand that was caressing her head felt a strange sense of warmth in the warmth. How many years had it been? Not even his closest family had been so affectionate to him. His father was cold and heartless, and he only looked at the scales of benefits. Mother was busy with magic. The two younger brothers were already like sharks in their mother's womb, beginning to cultivate each other's forces, preparing to devour each other in the future, and Duque, the young mage who claimed to be her master, gave her the warmth that she had longed for a long time. In her heart, Illugia sighed. If only Duque was my husband. Peace of mind, safety. But he will definitely not accept me. Father's asking price is something that even the king cannot afford. Illugia was very clear about her bastard father's character. For the sake of the family's interests, he would definitely use her marriage to maximize the benefits of the Bara family. Lowering her head lightly, Illugia let out a silent sigh. In Thurbercher's Horde's camp, Grom Hellscream let out a deep sigh as well. For the first time, he felt a heavy burden on his shoulders. He had thought that only 200,000 of the 400,000 orcs that crossed the sea from the Western Front would be able to destroy the humans of the entire northern continent. With the new transport ships that had been modified by the goblins, the Horde had a total of 320,000 orcs that had successfully landed, and 250,000 of them were warriors. Grom had thought that victory was in the bag. Who knew that the humans would come up with some kind of fire-breathing weapon? They did not know what it was, but once they came into contact with that sticky thing, they could only wait for their entire body to burn. Apart from the Blackrock tribe who were naturally resistant to fire, the others would most likely die if they came into contact with it. In order to save on the food that was transported from the transport ships, Grom had to order the injured to take the lead in every attack to reduce the enemy's firepower. The only fortunate thing was that the enemy did not have too many fire-breathing devices, and their range was not too far. Even from the archer towers, they could only shoot about 20 meters away. If they were on the ground, it would be even closer. First, they would use long-range weapons like catapults to attack. At the risk of sacrificing some of their people, they could still pull the humans into close combat. However, every time they were about to win and kill most of the humans, these disgusting fire-breathing weapons would appear. Every time the horde failed, the horde would fail. Now, the area around Cerberture had become a meat grinder. Tens of thousands of Alliance and Horde members died here every day. Sensing light footsteps behind him, Grum did not even turn around. What's the situation at the back? Sword Saint Samuro appeared from the blurry air. Ghoul, Dan has gathered more compatriots from the Door of Darkness. Although their combat power has decreased, at least they have made up for it in terms of numbers. Rend Blackhand and his brother are now leading 300,000 beastmen to attack the Earthy Highlands. Even I can't break through that bridge. Can those two brats from the Blackhand family do it? Grom was ferocious, but if he met someone who could take 3 blows from him without dying, he would not be able to do anything. This person was a militia captain named Prince of Torbane. It's not just attacking from the bridge. Ghoul, Dan suggests that we fill in the strait. Fill in the strait? Didn't you say it was impossible? Indeed, the horde had tried before, but the moment they threw rocks or clods, they would be swept away. After a few days, the rapid strait did not seem to be narrowing at all, so the horde gave up. No, Ghoul, Dan got inspiration from the humans blocking our transport ships. He told Rend Blackhand that the rocks weren't big enough. As long as we throw a big enough rock, we can still block the strait. Rend did as he was told and is now reinforcing the strait. Grom was stunned. Alright, I have to say, the humans are a smart race. It's a pity we finally have Ghoul, Dan on our side. Sealing the strait and creating a passageway for the army to pass through will take about 2 weeks. Alright, then I'll nail the main force of the humans here. Flames burned in Grom's eyes. Chapter 326. After discovering that crossing the sea wasn't a good choice, the orcs who learned that they could fill the straits and cross the sea regarded this as their highest priority. On the entire 200-kilometer stretch of the straits that separated the northern and southern continents and was now known as the Solder Straits, there were orc laborers pushing boulders to fill the sea. 108,109,110. When Lilith killed the orcs from the other side of the river and counted down to 110, she frowned. The dragon cavalry came again. More red dragons, more Dragonmaw tribe orcs. The Alliance couldn't do anything to them. After all, the Alliance lacked a powerful air force that could fight against the red dragon cavalry. There weren't many griffins left, and they were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of quality. Recklessly resisting was equivalent to courting death. In Duque's impression, the only ones who could deal with the orc cavalry without hurting the red dragons were the night elves' Hippogryphon cavalry from another continent. What a pity! The night elves' indifferent attitude meant that they wouldn't participate in this war. Duque had to let Aurelia, Servanas, and Lilith each lead 300 rangers to deal with the Dragonmaw tribe's agile attacks. However, the entire bay was being filled up at a speed visible to the naked eye. Duque felt like he had shot himself in the foot. If he had let the Horde's transport ships go, there wouldn't have been so much trouble. Maybe the Horde would still foolishly collect ships to continue crossing the sea. Duque's flamethrower couldn't do much here, because he had the genuine dragon breath. How passive a war without air supremacy was. Duque, Aurelia, and the Alliance bosses on Stormguard's side all felt it deeply. Duque, my intuition tells me that you've already predicted something. What are you waiting for? Aurelia took advantage of the fact that there was no one around to catch Duque. Duque had evaded the first attack with a flash, and then activated Ice Barrier to break the Great Demon King's trap, but he was still caught by the other Demon King. Servanas took advantage of the moment when Duque's Ice Barrier's absolute defense ended to descend from the tree like a ghost, his hand reaching over to grab Duque's ear. Don't. I surrender. Outside the grove, Gavin Rad, who was technically a bodyguard, blew a whistle to indicate that he couldn't see or hear anything. In the forest, resistance is severe. Tell the truth and you'll be lenient. The Windrunner sisters used the words they learned from Duque and used them on Duque. Duque was speechless. Duque was unyielding. Someone still owes me a lot of, good brother. If I don't clear my debt first, there's no deal. But the bastard's pretentiousness only lasted for a while. After all, this involved the Windrunner family, so Duque didn't keep them in suspense for too long. It's been 8 days since the second sea crossing battle, and we haven't found Orgrim's flag. This doesn't fit Orgrim's character. I'm 70% sure that Orgrim has personally led his army across the sea. Where is he? If I'm not wrong, he should be here with no more than 50,000 Horde elites. Duque opened the map he carried with him and pointed at the hinterlands. The Windrunner sisters didn't look too good. This is both a good and a bad thing. Duque paused for a moment. The good thing is that the Horde will definitely anger another dwarf branch that lives in Eagle Nest Mountain, the Wildhammer Dwarves. The Wildhammer Dwarves are good friends with the Griffins that breed in Eagle Nest Mountain. Their Griffin Knights were also quite famous. Now we don't have to worry about not having an air force. Aurelia's expression became even worse. The bad thing is that the Horde has gone behind the main force of the Alliance. The Silverpine Forest was to the west, the hinterlands to the east, and the Arthy Highlands to the south. The Alliance was surrounded on 3 sides. No, I'm not worried about that. The Wildhammer Dwarves are very strong. As long as we have enough reinforcements, the Horde will definitely be able to withstand the attack. The problem is, after that, if the elites of the Horde can't go west. The two sisters' gazes followed Duque's finger to the north. That was the hinterland of Lordaeron. If they passed through Saradan in the hinterlands, they would be able to reach the holy city of Stratholme. Is the Horde going to attack Stratholme? Queen Sylvie asked. No. They can't take Stratholme. Right now, the Holy Light Archbishop Fail is mass-producing Holy Saya in Stratholme. There's half of the Silver Hand Knights there, and Stratholme's defense is comparable to Lordaeron's. As long as the Horde can't take them down, they will be surrounded and killed. They will be surrounded and killed by the endless stream of humans coming to defend the Holy City. Then, I'm worried about your hometown, Cuel Salis. At this time, the two sisters looked at Duque as if he was an idiot. Aurelia put her hands on her hips like a proud rooster. The entire forest of Cuel Salis has a magic shield. Those stupid trolls won't be able to break in even if they spend another 10,000 years. Queen Sylvie also put her hands on her hips and puffed out her chest, as if she was right. Have you forgotten that the Horde actually has warlocks? There's a rough description of the magic shield of your forest in the books of Karazhan. If you use runestones, as long as enough power is used to corrode a few of the runestones in the key parts of your forest, the magic shield that protects the entire forest will be a joke. When Duque said this, the faces of the two Windrunner sisters had completely lost all color. They were deathly pale. As the ranger generals of Cuel Salis, of course, they knew the secrets of the magic shield of the forest. The daily maintenance of the runestones was also carried out under their eyes. If they did not know Duque very well, Aurelia and her sister would definitely think that Duque was a spy sent by the trolls. And Duque's last words extinguished the last bit of hope in the hearts of the two Windrunner sisters. According to my calculations, the worst-case scenario is that the trolls choose to join the Horde. Then Cuel Salis will face a disaster. From the bottom of their hearts, the Windrunner sisters did not want to believe Duque's deduction. But along the way, when had Duque's deduction of the big picture ever been wrong? Their slim bodies were trembling. Duque stepped forward and put one hand on each of their shoulders. You've done enough for the Alliance. While the situation has not collapsed, quickly go back and warn Cuel Salis. Also, remember to evacuate your parents and third sister to Silvermoon City. That's the only safer place. Chapter 327. Aurelia bit her lip. What about the line of defense along the strait? Duque shook his head. Everyone knows that we can't hold it. In fact, 90% of the people in the Arthy Highlands have retreated to Torrentburg. Even if we give up the Arthy Highlands, the Alliance can still hold on for a long time. We don't have to worry about the Horde taking the opportunity to invade the Hillsbrad Hills. After all, there is the Thoradin Wall there. The Thoradin Wall was a huge fortification built by Thoradin the Great to resist the trolls. It was a combination of a huge fortress and a city wall. The stone used to build the fortress was the hardest granite, and it was solidified by the earth element. Heavy catapults could only leave a shallow dent on it at most. There, one man could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. Duque smiled calmly. Go back. As a good friend and the commander of the Alliance, I agree to let you take all the Rangers back. Your homeland needs you more than the Alliance needs you. At this moment, the saint-level moral integrity that Medivh had inherited was shining. Did the Alliance not need the High Elves archers? Torrentburg, which was about to be attacked by the Horde's Red Dragon cavalry, desperately needed the help of the Elven Rangers. Both Duque and Aurelia knew this. Duque had informed Quel Salis in advance that the Horde would threaten them and let them go. Of course, Aurelia had volunteered to bring the elites of the Windrunner family to help. If they wanted to leave, the Alliance had no reason to stop them. It was to avoid putting Aurelia in a difficult position that Duque let her Rangers go. It was conceivable that once the Rangers left, Duque would be reprimanded by King Salas of Torrentburg. Aurelia's face burned. She was the one who volunteered to help. When the Horde needed her and her troops the most, she was the one who wanted to leave. If Duque had been more heartless and concealed the tribe's movements from the intelligence report, or had not told her the deduction of the direction of the war, and only found out at the last moment that she had been pulled into the main force, Aurelia, who had been squeezed dry for a long time, might have been able to be heartless. Now that Duque was so open and above board, Aurelia felt that her guard was softening bit by bit. Aurelia said the word "I" 3 times in a row and didn't finish her sentence. The more carefree Duque's smile was, the more uncomfortable Aurelia felt. You should go back first. Use your and the Windrunner family's influence to see if you can wake up those arrogant old mages from their sweet dreams. Then I'll save as many as I can, right? Aurelia shuddered. She had never thought that Duque would actually include the corruption in Silvermoon City. The thought of arguing with the pharaoh of the Silvermoon Council, who only knew how to hold them back, gave Aurelia a headache. At this moment, Servanas patted his sister's shoulder. Sister, you should bring the main force back. I'll stay with the combat team that His Majesty the Sun King promised to the Alliance. I'll work hard for your share as well. Or, you don't trust my archery skills? Looking at her smiling sister, Aurelia finally realized that this was the best choice. As a Ranger General, her influence in the country was much greater than her second sister's. As long as she brought the main force of the Windrunner family back, things would still be promising. Seeing the determination written on his sister's face, Servanas smiled. Yes, I have to go back and tell the people who stayed behind. With that, he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and disappeared, leaving behind an awkward Aurelia. Perhaps it was because she had seen Duque's appearance that Aurelia did not want to admit Duque's growth. That was why every time she saw Duque, she wanted to bully Duque like a strong elder. Unfortunately, even if she did not want to admit it, she had to admit it. Duque was no longer the little Duque she was familiar with. From his body to his intelligence to his way of dealing with people, it had only been less than a year, but Duque had completely grown up. He had become a great man who played an important role in various countries, and even the entire world of Azeroth. Lightly pursing her lips, Aurelia seemed to have made up her mind. The next second, Duque suddenly found a warm and plump female body behind him. Good brother, good brother, good brother. There was not the slightest pretense. Instead, when the orchid scent mixed with a touch of bashfulness blew into his ears, it made Duque's ears turn red. When Duque reacted, Quel Salis's heroine, Aurelia, had already disappeared in the wind. Duque touched his ears and muttered to himself, "This time, there shouldn't be a tragedy, right?" Duque was a little lost. He had already changed too much of the history. In his previous life, Aurelia had lost her youngest brother, Riras, and her parents in the joint attack of the orcs and trolls. This made her hate the orcs to the point of permanent solidification. That was how the heroine of the Alliance Expeditionary Force, Aurelia, who crossed the Dark Portal and went on an expedition to the Draenor world. Duque did not know how history would be changed this time. Since Aurelia was so good to him and had an inexplicable relationship with him, Duque could not bear to see Aurelia's family die a tragedy. Sigh, let's see what Orgrim will do. Almost at the same time, Orgrim encountered a strange creature in the hinterlands. According to the scout's report, he thought that they had encountered ogres. Although these creatures were smaller in size, they displayed grace and quiet movements that he had never seen before on such a large creature. But when a ray of sunlight shone on one of the creatures that came forward, Orgrim discovered that the creature's skin was green, just like most of his subordinates and the color of the surrounding trees. This also explained why they did not notice these creatures before. The color of their skin allowed them to hide in the leaves, especially if they moved between branches like these creatures. He also saw that this creature was slightly taller than him, more capable than the ogres, and looked more balanced. This creature did not have overly long arms, large hands, or a large head. He stared at the creature in front of him. When he saw the glint in the creature's dark eyes, the creature suddenly thrust the spear in its hand at Orgrim. This showed that they were very intelligent. "We are not your enemies." Doomhammer roared. His roar tore apart the silence of the night. He knocked the spear away with one hand. Only then did he realize that the spearhead was made of stone and was abnormally sharp. "I want to see your leader." Chapter 328. Especially after Orgrim showed off his empty-handed blade grab, the trolls clearly recognized Orgrim's status as a powerful orc. After all, he was no newbie. With the same thrust, he had killed dozens of dwarves and humans. "What do you want from our leader?" "I don't think our leader's meat is any better than ours, he." Orgrim spoke in the human language, and so did the trolls. Even though their tones were frighteningly strange, it did not stop them from communicating. Especially after noticing that they had a common interest in spoils of war, human skulls, the hostility between them decreased significantly. "We are orcs from the Blackrock tribe of the Horde." Trolls, forest trolls, Amani tribe. The troll was surprised that the orcs did not know about the trolls. "Alright, tell me, why do you want to see our leader?" "I want to talk to him, for our common enemy." Orgrim emphasized the second half of the sentence. The Horde's disadvantage at sea had cost them dearly. Orgrim was not a simple-minded person like Blackhand. He had already begun to realize that humans, dwarves, and elves would all bring more trouble to the orcs. If the orcs wanted to conquer this world, they would have to defeat the allied forces of the three powerful races. This was definitely not an easy task for the orcs, who were already greatly weakened. Since the Horde had already accepted the ogres and the human death knights, why couldn't they accept the trolls? What's more, their almost identical green skin allowed them to have something in common. However, diplomacy did not rely on talking. All diplomacy was based on force. Even though Orgrim had already restrained himself and kept his warhammer a meter away from his hand to show that he had no ill intentions, the other troll obviously had a different thought process than the first one. "We never negotiate with our meal." "Meal? These guys actually see us orcs as a meal?" Orgrim let out a cold laugh. That guy made his move. A powerful spear throw. The spear seemed to break through the atmosphere, and it was swift and violent in a way that most orcs did not expect. Simple and direct. The only thing special about it was its speed. It was unbelievably fast, so fast that it was insane. A moment ago, the javelin was just a small black dot in his field of vision. The next moment, it occupied Orgrim's entire field of vision. If this continued, the spear would be like a watermelon piercing through the head of the Horde's great chief. Of course, the prerequisite was that Orgrim, who was known as the Hammer of Destruction, stood there like an idiot. Without even dodging, Orgrim grabbed his warhammer. Hammer of Destruction, which looked like a heavy weapon, was as light as a dagger in front of Orgrim's powerful arm strength. In the blink of an eye, the huge square-headed black warhammer had already whipped up a gust of wind as it swung like a baseball bat hitting a baseball. It was a perfect, grand slam home run. Orgrim actually managed to deflect the troll's spear, and the broken shaft of the spear pierced right through the troll's knee. That guy let out a miserable howl and tightly hugged his pierced leg. Huh! Orgrim let out a loud battle cry. The deafening roar caused the surrounding leaves to howl with Orgrim at the center. The other trolls were shocked by Orgrim's roar, and they stopped their attacks that were supposed to save their comrade. Of course, Orgrim would not give the guy who dared to offend the great chief of the horde a chance to beg for mercy. He needed to establish his dominance. This guy who dared to run into his hammer must die. With an earth-shattering leap-slash, Orgrim leaped forward and crossed a distance of 5 meters. Like a god descending from the heavens, he appeared in front of the fallen troll. Hammer of Destruction carried Orgrim's anger at being provoked, and with an unparalleled might, it smashed towards the troll's head. Puff! For the first time, the troll's skull turned into a watermelon. This was not the end. In the next moment, from the collarbone, shoulder blade, pelvic bone, leg bone, all the bones and flesh within the range of the Hammer of Destruction were smashed into pieces, and blood and flesh splattered everywhere. A troll that was more than 3 meters tall was instantly turned into a pile of minced meat that even his mother wouldn't be able to recognize. I'll say it again. I want to see your leader. The words were a request, and the tone was a command. As Orgrim roared, he turned around and unleashed his most powerful pressure on the other trolls. These trolls were still in a daze from this bloody and brutal counterattack. They were trembling in fear. Bring me to him, or I'll kill everyone who refuses to do so. Then, I'll go find the trolls who are willing to bring me there myself. Hammer of Destruction was raised high in the air. With the cheers of the orcs as the background, the blood dripping from the black stone hammer, the faded fur, and the broken bones and flesh, the remaining trolls lost the courage to challenge Orgrim. Orgrim's domineering aura was effective. All the trolls took a step back, put their spears on their backs, and spread their hands to show that they were not hostile. Then, a troll with a necklace of bones walked out from the middle of them. You want to talk to Zujin? If Zujin is your leader's name or title, then yes. Orgrim nodded. You will see him. We will wait here. Hammer of Destruction calmly announced to the troll and his subordinates. An hour later, without any warning, a shadow emerged from the forest with huge and quiet steps, bringing with it the troll and 3 other powerful trolls who looked extremely capable. If you want to see Zujin, then I am. Zujin was much taller and more capable than the other trolls. He was wearing a leather vest that was unbuttoned. A thick scarf was wrapped around his neck, covering the area below his nose. The parts that were exposed gave a ferocious impression. Because he was close enough, Orgrim noticed that the troll's skin was covered in moss. What a strange race. You want our forest? Or do you want to fight us for those despicable humans and elves? If you're here to issue a challenge, then I've received it. Zujin's hand went to his waist. There were 2 axes hanging there. No, it's the opposite. We have a common enemy. Orgrim grinned. His swaying fangs made Zujin uncomfortable. Chapter 329. Duque did not try to stop the trolls from joining the tribe. That would be a waste of effort. Trolls joining the tribe was almost inevitable. 14,000 years ago in Azeroth, the trolls, the native race of Azeroth, had established many large kingdoms. Amani and Gurubashi were the largest, and these 2 kingdoms were ruled by the Zendala tribe. Thus, they were praised as the Great Zendala Empire. 7,000 years ago, Dasrima Sunstrider brought along the elven nobles who wanted to continue researching and using arcane magic. They left their fellow night elves who followed the teachings of the druids and accepted exile and migrated to the northern continent of the Eastern Kingdom, commonly known as the Lordaeron continent. These high elves who moved east evolved into high elves and established their own magic kingdom, Kuel Salis. As a new nation of immigrants, Kuel Salis and the local troll Amani Empire began a war over the issue of land expansion that lasted thousands of years. Until 2,800 years ago, when humans began to rise, Thoradin the Great united the human tribes and established the Arathar Empire. The High Elves' kingdom of Kuel Salis was no match for the troll Amani Empire. In desperation, they sought help from humans and began to teach them the power of arcane magic. Arathur and the kingdom of Kuel Salis worked together to defeat the troll Amani Empire. The trolls were unable to recover from this setback, and the troll war came to an end. It could be said that the trolls had a feud with humans and elves that had been passed down for thousands of years. Their blood and souls had been poured on this continent in the fierce battle. The hatred had long been so strong that it could not be dissolved. Furthermore, there were too many troll clans. Even if Duque had dealt with the Amani clan in advance, there were still many other clans on this continent. For example, the Zandala tribe in Stranglethorn Vale was the ancestors of all trolls. They were also known as primitive trolls. Trolls were generally divided into 5 main groups. Other than primitive trolls, there were also jungle trolls, forest trolls, desert trolls, and ice trolls. There were many branches of different sizes according to their attributes. Sand Fury, Ice Hare, Evil Branch, Blood Scalp, Skull Splitter, and other small branches were ignored. There were 7 or 8 large Amani-level clans. Rather than letting Orgrim form an alliance with the trolls, it would be better to leave it to the Amani. At least Duque would be able to predict their route of advance. Of course, before dealing with Orgrim's elite army and trolls, Duque still had something important to do. Cover the retreat of Stromgard's troops to Torrentberg and Saladin's Wall. The most frightening thing about a retreat was being routed. Once the rearguard troops were destroyed, one could imagine the following scenario: the torrent of green that represented the Horde orcs and the silver that represented the Stormguard kingdom crossed over the entire Arthi Highlands. The bitter silver was chased by the green from all directions. The human army, which was severely lacking in transportation, was torn apart by the orcs who charged from all directions in the battle on the plains. After fighting for so long, the Alliance and the Horde were really angry. It was conceivable that if the retreat failed, not many people would be spared. The orcs who had better endurance would chase down every human who tried to escape and kill them in the cruelest way possible. There were no captives, no mercy. Only 1 in 100 soldiers would be able to return to Torrentberg alive. The Arthi Highlands where Torrentberg was located were not fertile. The mountainous nature of the highlands limited the production of food and the upper limit of the total population. Among the 7 human kingdoms, the population of the Stormguard kingdom was only slightly higher than that of the pure mountainous Alterac kingdom. In a sense, Stormguard was even weaker than Stormwind, which had lost its territory. At the very least, the fertile elven forest fed hundreds of thousands of Stormwind citizens. The total population of Stormguard was less than 250,000. To be able to gather an army of 30,000 was already the limit of what the people of Torrentberg could do. Salas Trollbane could not imagine that if he lost all the 50,000 people at the Sodder Bridge, including the civilian workers, would there be a tomorrow for Torrentberg? However, the most capable troops of the Alliance were basically fighting the main orc force of Grom Helhal's Warsong clan at the Western Front. The greatest support the Stormguard people received was half of the Scarlet Cross Legion led by Abendis. Abendis's men went to the Wall of Soridon to replace the people of Torrentberg so that Salas had more troops to defend Torrentberg. Other than that, there was Duque's mages and Aurelia's rangers. When he heard that Aurelia was worried about something happening in the country and left with her men, if it was not for the fact that Duque and Aurelia had a close relationship, Salas would have scolded her in public. "Don't be agitated, General Trollbane. I let Aurelia go back because I have enough confidence that I can successfully protect 90% of the Stormguard soldiers to return to Torrentberg safely." Salas was stunned for a full 5 seconds before he came to his senses. This ridiculously young deputy commander of the Alliance standing in front of him had a much more impressive battle record than the actual commander of the Alliance, Noxus. Perhaps Duque had not proven himself in offensive battles, but when it came to defense, interception, and evacuation under extremely disadvantageous circumstances, Duque was definitely an expert among experts. It seems like you can't burn down the entire defense line in the Straits?" King Salas asked a very amusing question. Duque burst out laughing. "Sorry, I didn't mean to offend you." "Offend? The Arthi people don't care about etiquette. As long as you can protect these people, I can even let my son be your attendant." Salas sold his son without any shame. Duque still had a lot of respect for the Arthi people who had the Torrentberg as their core. In the history, the Torrentberg had withstood the undead calamity head-on. Even when there were only 3,000 people left in the kingdom, none of them gave up. They fought bravely in various areas of the Arthi Highlands, declaring their resistance and unyieldingness to the tribes and all invaders. No, 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 I am not shameless enough to make a prince my attendant. If he really did this, it would undoubtedly make Duque feel that he was full of arrogance. In fact, I have always advocated the minimum sacrifice in exchange for the greatest results. Very well, Deputy Commander Marcus, what do you plan to do? Salas paused for a moment, but still felt that he had to give Duque a little benefit. If you succeed, you will undoubtedly become a hero in the hearts of the people of Torrentberg. I think there will be no less than 100 knight candidates in Torrentberg who admire your prestige and volunteer to become your followers. 100 quasi-knights did not sound like a lot. But considering that there were 100 of them who were very good at fighting and could help him manage his fief, the weight was much greater. Chapter 330. Duque had also doubted the loyalty of the people from Torrential Fortress. Knights who could fight were still useful. If they were loyal to someone else's king, it would be a pain in the ass. In fact, after inspecting the goods, Duque realized that he had been thinking too much. This was a world with a feudal aristocratic system. Even if the customs of the Seven Kingdoms were different, they were still the same, the descendants of the Arather Empire, the people of Thoradin the Great. The nobles who were loyal to other human kingdoms did not have as many problems as one might imagine. In this era, only the eldest son could inherit the land. The second, third, fourth, and daughter could only be filled in according to the order below. Generally speaking, the second and third sons might have some hope. They could pray for something to happen to their eldest brother, but there was no hope for the rest. Just like in Stormwind's elven forest, 1,000 years of inheritance had already given up all the land in the Arthi Highlands. If they wanted new land, they could only reach out to the outside or the royal family. To the south of the Arthi Highlands was the territory of the Bronzebeard dwarves. To the east was the sea. To the west was Alterax's territory behind the Thoradin Wall. To the north was the hinterlands near the Arthi Highlands. It was still the dwarves, but they were the Wildhammer dwarves. Hence, the Stormguard kingdom was completely unable to expand. As the saying went, barren hills and wild rivers produce tough people. The Arthi soldiers had outstanding combat power. Apart from equipment, the Arthi people's land combat power was definitely one of the best in the Seven Kingdoms. Of course, because they were poor and had poor equipment, their overall combat power was not as good as the people of Rotterdam. With 100 knight candidates, Duque had made a profit. Anyway, Duque did not intend to let the people from Torrential Fortress suffer a loss. The knight candidates had a good impression of Duque. First of all, Duque's reputation was illustrious. The Alliance's vice-commander, the slayer of nearly 300,000 orcs, an archmage with a limitless future, the inventor of a new weapon, and the biggest financial backer of the Stormwind Kingdom. There was nothing more promising than having a boss who could fight, make money, and help his underlings get benefits. If the Alliance could not defeat the Horde in this race war, then it would be the end of the human race. If the Alliance won, it would be natural for them to exterminate the Beastmen. Once Stormwind was restored, Duque's status would be exaggerated. He would be a true Grand Duke, a Grand Lord. The eastern part of the fertile Elven Forest, a small piece of the Night Forest, a large piece of the Red Ridge Mountain, and the Upwind Trail area. Looking at the situation, Duque's fief might not be limited to just this. This was a better piece of land than the whole of the Arthi Highlands. These knight candidates were so excited that they were about to go crazy. They couldn't wait to become Duque's followers and wear the battle robe of the Marcus family. Of course, this was on the premise that Duque had to successfully evacuate the 50,000 Storm Guardians to Torrentberg. 20,000 elite soldiers, 10,000 auxiliary soldiers, and 20,000 craftsmen and militia. If Duque was just an inexperienced brat, or if he had a better idea, King Salas Trollbane would not let Duque make the arrangements. But he was Duque, the Alliance's hero, Duke Marcus. The weight of this name alone was enough to make Salas trust Duque more than himself. When Salas asked, "What are you going to do?" and Duque took out a thick stack of action guides, Salas was stunned for a full 3 seconds. Without waiting for Duque to explain in detail, Salas snapped his fingers. "In the name of the King of Stormguard and the General of the Alliance Army, I command you. During the retreat, all of you must listen to the orders of the Deputy Commander, Sir Marcus. Those who disobey will be punished by my sword." With that, Salas unsheathed his sword and handed it to Duque in a solemn manner. Duque was dumbfounded. King Salas smiled faintly. "Sorry, I am the kind of person who can't help but rush into battle when I see it. Besides, the Trollbane family will only fight to the last moment, victory or death. If I stay here, I will only interfere with your command and become a burden to you. I only hope that you will not betray the trust of me and the people of Torrentburg. At least 50,000 ladies are waiting for the return of their man." Duque's expression turned serious. "Don't worry, since I can lead 50,000 besieged Stormwind elite soldiers across the sea, I can also lead 50,000 people of Torrentburg back to their homes and become the last line of defense for Torrentburg." That night, the tribe's beastmen in charge of reclamation discovered the changes on the other side. Compared to the day, the beastmen preferred to reclaim the sea at night, because the accuracy of the ballistae and catapults on the other side would be greatly reduced. Often, one night's work could be equivalent to 4 days' work. But today was different. Almost as soon as the beastmen reclamation team reached the middle of the strait, a large string of flashing flares rose from the other side of the strait, illuminating the area within a diameter of more than 100 meters as if it was daytime. The next moment, accompanied by the fierce beating of war drums, the sound of countless bowstrings sounded from the other side. Large ballistae, small arrows, and pebbles were all rained down on the vital parts of the beastmen who ran over to reclaim the sea with rocks on their backs. Not only did the attacks look dense, but they were also very effective. Of the more than 200 beastmen laborers who went up, none were spared. They all died there, and not a single one returned. 5 minutes later, the beastmen in the middle of the strait suffered the same devastating blow. Another 5 minutes later, the same thing happened downstream. The commander of the beastmen was shocked. What the hell was this? He had no choice but to call for the Dragon Maw Beastmen's dragon riders, but it seemed that the terrifying elven ranger was still there. With the support of the High Elves' night vision, the sharp arrows of death still pierced through the beastmen's throats. That night, there were 5 crossings, and the beastmen lost the lives of 2,000 laborers, but their progress was completely stagnant. When he received the report, Red Blackhand, the son of the former chief, didn't care. "Let Zulu Hid continue to send out his precious red lizards. Keep attacking during the day, and I'll see how long the humans can last." The beastmen didn't have the gift of night vision, and because the red dragons didn't cooperate, the beastmen dragon riders were more effective during the day. The attack on Sodder Bridge continued, and the humans seemed to have concentrated their forces on the bridge. The defenses there were still impenetrable. But elsewhere, the dragon riders had successfully destroyed more than 100 unguarded ballistae and catapults. Chapter 331. This is progress. It proves that the humans are beginning to weaken. Ren laughed. At the beginning of the attack, the humans could still use the high mobility of the mage's teleportation and the sniping of the 2 half-elves to prevent the beastmen from gaining any advantage. Of course, Half was referring to Lilith's Windrunner. Even though Illyria held her sister in high esteem, there was always a difference between an advertisement and reality, wasn't there? Lilith's archery was also very good. Her talent was also top-notch among the rangers. But she lacked the competitive heart of a strong warrior, which happened to be the most important thing for her to truly step into the realm of heroes. Now, even if the beastmen still had to pay a high price, the beastmen could still rely on their strong capital to deplete the strength of the alliance. The following days seemed to be a tug-of-war. The humans only guarded the bridge and at night, relied on long-range attacks to snipe the beastmen's reclamation. Taking advantage of the arrival of the night, the craftsmen frantically built and repaired the catapults and ballistae. During the day, There were still so many human soldiers patrolling the defense line of Solderbridge that the Beastmen scouts were dazzled. There seemed to be nothing wrong. But the Storm Guardians who were still at Solderbridge were moved to tears. But the main force had all withdrawn. Apart from the 5,000 elite soldiers and 3,000 craftsmen who were guarding the bridge, the rest had been orderly evacuated at a rate of about 5,000 people per night in the past week. Without lighting torches, they only relied on the white cloth wrapped around each other's shoulders and walked back along the road under the guidance of the best scouts. The range of the Dragonmaw orcs was limited. As long as they were more than 20 kilometers away from the northern position of Solderbridge, even ghosts would not know. During the days of retreat, what Servanas did the most was not to kill the enemy near the cliff, but to kill the enemy scouts who went too deep into the defense line and rode on the flying dragons. The remaining small team of elven rangers each had a few human scouts and a mage under Duque. Once they discovered the invasion of the tribe's flying dragons, Duque would immediately teleport with Queen Sylvie to the preset teleportation circle and kill the tribe's scouts. The scouts near the cliff line did not pay any attention. Every night, there was only one person in charge of sniping the tribe, Duque. After becoming a Morning Star wizard, Duque could control 512 Magus hands at the same time. Being able to do it did not mean that it could be done in the long run. For example, a grown man could lift something that weighed 100 kilograms for a while, but if he wanted to lift it for an hour, it would really be impossible. Only 1 in 10,000 could do it. Servanas, who had been following Duque for the past 3 days, quietly watched as Duque made all sorts of incredible efforts to save the lives of the 50,000 Torrential Castle soldiers. Duque was clearly immortal, but he demanded of him as a Superman. As a noble mage with a limitless future, not only did he personally fight on the front lines, he did not hesitate to lower his status and do the lowly work of controlling the ballistae with the hand of magic. From west to east, there were a total of 12 ballista positions, each with more than 30 ballistas, 12 catapults, and 500 ballistas that were basically fixed, loaded, and aimed at the coast. There was only one person controlling them, Duke Marcus. With the help of the system elf, he shot a perfect kill in every wave, not letting a single laborer escape. Almost as soon as he finished attacking one position, Duque would immediately teleport to the next. After he left, the logistics team of less than 30 people quickly came out and reloaded every ballista, catapult, and ballista. It was no exaggeration to say that, depending on the situation of the tribe's attack, Duque would teleport back and forth between the 12 positions 30 to 40 times in a night. For the current Duke, just the huge consumption of stamina and spiritual force was enough to squeeze 10 ordinary Morning Star wizards dry, not to mention being a wizard. Duque was still persevering. The people of Torrential Castle sighed at Duque's strength, and on the other hand, they were moved to tears by Duque's greatness. Sometimes in the command post, Duque would be so tired that he would fall asleep while talking. No one blamed Duque. Duque had done enough. If not for Duque, perhaps most of them would not have made it back to Torrential Castle alive. On the 8th day, the most crucial moment had arrived. According to the plan, all the troops would be withdrawn tonight, leaving only Duque and Servanas to bring up the rear. This was simply inconceivable. If not for Duque's various miracles over the past few days, everyone would have completely opposed Duque. Sir, you've done enough, that's good enough. If you want to sacrifice yourself in exchange for the survival of the people of Torrential Castle, then please forgive us for not being able to follow your orders. Brigadier General Autruz, who was the last to stay behind, shouted excitedly, raising his voice by a few notches. Next, it's time for the people of Torrential Castle to bleed. Not only Autruz, but a dozen or so Stormguard generals also stepped forward and formed a wall of will and flesh, blocking in front of Duque. Summon His Majesty Salas Trollbane's order. Even if we have to kidnap, we must bring His Excellency Duke Marcus back to Torrential Castle ahead of time. It seems that a great hero like Duque should not die in such a pointless way. Compared to Torrential Castle, the Alliance needs Duke Marcus more. What are you doing? I know you mean well, but are you going to rebel? At the same time, Servanas, who had drawn his twin swords, and Gavinrad, who had taken out his warhammer, stood in front of Duque, one on the left and one on the right. Although they knew that most people would not fight, they had to have an attitude. Brigadier General Autruz did not expect Duque's men to react so fiercely, and his momentum was stifled for a moment. Duque looked at Autruz calmly. If there were no exceptions, this man would become a marshal in the future. Duque sighed, and then his eyes gradually became full of power. Enough. I appreciate King Trollbane's good intentions. But remember, I am Duque. Duke Marcus. The wizard who would bite off a piece of flesh from the enemy even if he was defeated and had to retreat. When I retreated last time, I burned 100,000 orcs to death. This time I have to retreat. How can I be satisfied if I don't kill 100,000 orcs? When Duque said this, Autruz actually asked, "Then where are we going to get the kerosene?" Duque froze, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Bastard, who said I'm going to start a fire again? Ugh, god of fire Duque isn't going to start a fire? Damn it, when did I become a god of fire? Duque was so angry at Autruz that he laughed until tears came out of his eyes. Get lost. Who said I only know how to start a fire? Let me tell you, the one standing in front of you today is Ghost Schemer Duque. Chapter 332. Ghost Schemer Duque? Who would give themselves a nickname these days? Why did the Alliance have the name Fire God Duque? It was because Duque was good at using fire. He burned half of the Elven Forest, burned Stormwind City, and used the FFF flamethrowers to burn down the Horde's main force in Silverpine Forest. Most of Duque's famous battles were related to fire. Giving him the nickname Fire God was not a bad idea. Unfortunately, Duque was not happy about it. How could a mere god of fire compare to the leader of the four major elements? What heaven-defying god of magic? That's right. I should at least be an archmage. Anyway, Duque did not want to be a fire god. Duque knew very well that the retreat was half a success. If he could do this, he would probably be given the title of strategist. That was not enough. Orgrim must have landed in the hinterlands. For some reason, there was no news from there, but Duque had to settle things here as soon as possible and mobilize troops to deal with Orgrim. If the battle at Riptide Stronghold was very tight, Duque as the Alliance's deputy commander could not leave, nor could he mobilize troops in advance. So, if Duque wanted to reduce the pressure on Riptide Stronghold, the best way was to make the Horde suffer again. The Horde's troops did not seem to be decreasing. Only Duque and the commanders of Stormwind City, who had been fighting with the Horde for the longest, felt it the most. The Horde had begun to decline. For example, the Horde's combat power was 100 before, but now it was at most 70. As the losses increased, the Horde's combat power would reach a critical point. Once it broke through this critical point, the quantitative change would become a qualitative change. When that time came, the Alliance would switch from defense to offense. Seeing that General Autruz and the others wanted to say something, Duque gently pushed Servanas and Gavin Rad away and waved his hand at them. Gentlemen, thank you for your willingness to sacrifice for me. I appreciate your kindness. In the future, if I can't survive, I will come to you. On the contrary, if you can't survive in the future, you can look for me. As long as I defeat the orcs, I'll be a great lord. Duque shrugged and said, but before that, can I trouble you to get out of here according to the plan? Unless you have my magic power, knowledge, and stratagem, your poor imagination will never know what I want to do. Duque's words were no longer at the level of "you're welcome." If Duque had said this before, even if the king was above their heads, they would still find trouble with Duque. But men were such simple creatures. Once they had gone through life and death together, they were brothers. Not a single Storm Guardian took Duque's words as an insult or provocation. On the contrary, after seeing their compatriots who had a high chance of dying successfully retreat to Torrentburg, they saw Duque shining with divine light from head to toe. Alterace gritted his teeth. Promise me, you won't die here. I don't need to promise you that, because I still have to settle things here and find trouble with Orgrim. That green-painted bastard is still occupying my territory. Duque said wittily, but the confidence in his eyes still won over the people of Torrentburg. Nearly 20 generals of all sizes saluted Duque at the same time. After taking care of those valiant generals, Duke ordered Illusia. All right, there are still 2 hours before the orcs attack. I'm going to sleep for a while. Duke was too tired, even though his room in the encampment was terrible, with no spring mattress or soft pillows. Duke slept like a dead pig the moment he laid down. In his daze, he felt that he was lying on a very soft and smooth pillow. Duke moved his neck to make himself more comfortable. This is good, better than the space memory pillow. Duke did not know how long he slept, but the system elf's warning woke him up. Dear host, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I'm afraid you'll have to wake up from the blissful time of sleeping on your lap. Because the orcs are coming. Duke woke up in a daze, and he suddenly realized a word: lap pillow. The next moment, Duke opened his eyes and was almost blinded by what he saw. What did he see? His dog head was resting on 2 slender, round, but not sensual legs. Seeing the long mage dress wrapped around the legs, Duke immediately realized whose legs they were. Not only that, Duque, who was in a hurry to turn his head, bumped into something. It was a soft object that was less than 2 centimeters above his head. Something's wrong. Duque's body instantly stiffened. I'm a salted fish. I'm a motionless salted fish. I didn't do anything just now. The pure and innocent little virgin Duque hypnotized himself like a retard. At this time, Miss Berev also woke up. She rubbed her eyes, only to find that Duque was awake. Sorry, teacher. Duque, I didn't mean to offend you. I just saw that you were sleeping very hard. You were muttering, the pillow is too hard, or something, and when I came over, Duque was completely disheartened. I slept on your lap? Illusia blushed, but finally nodded. Why didn't you resist? Duque said almost as if he was possessed. I was confused by what you said about the space pillow. Illusia tried to change the topic. In fact, Duque's actions were even more crude, and the young lady of the Bera family was almost scared to death, but she did not dare to resist. A mage's body was fragile, and if she accidentally hurt Duque and caused the alliance's plan to fail, she would be guilty. And surprisingly, she did not seem to resist this kind of thing that should only be done between lovers. At this time, something that made Duque feel even more like a nightmare had happened. Suddenly, a soft cough came from outside the window. Even if Duque turned into ashes, he would still recognize that it was the voice of Queen Sylvanas. Ahem, I was worried that the Lord Deputy Commander was too tired, so I came to remind you to prepare for the tribe's night attack. It seems that the Lord Deputy Commander has something more important to do. No, actually Duque rushed out as fast as he could. Who knew that as soon as he stepped out of the door, Queen Sylvanas accidentally stepped on his foot. I'm sorry, I was really careless just now. Sister clearly repeatedly told me to take care of you. Sylvanas put his hands on his waist and slowly retracted his foot. At this moment, Duque finally understood the difference between being rude and being spoiled for a woman. If a girl stepped on your foot and scolded you, that was called being rude. If a beautiful goddess stepped on you, scolded you, and her breasts trembled when she scolded you, that would be called acting coquettishly. Well, for Queen Sylvanas, although Duque did not have any improper thoughts, he just could not get angry. Chapter 333. Duque was a pure person. Other than what he had learned from those 10 terabytes of romantic action movies, he was as pure as a saint. On theory. Come to think of it, if he longed for any kind of tender love from the Windrunner, he would have to eat a moronic pill to be able to do so. A mixture of wildness and nobility was the biggest trademark of the Windrunner family. If he liked someone, he liked them. If he hated them, he hated them. There was no need to hide it. The women of the Windrunner family were so straightforward and pure. However, after a little anger, Sylvanas suddenly realized that he actually had no reason to be angry. He felt that his elder sister and Duque did have that kind of taste. At the end of the day, it seemed that she and Duque weren't even lovers. Moreover, one look and he knew that Duque didn't do it on purpose. Moreover, Duque was really exhausted during this period of time. Silvermoon City didn't lack mages, and they were also the most pampered ones. Well, today's weather isn't good, so it's not suitable for anything. I, the pharaoh, am not serving. I'm going on strike. The cat next door was in heat last night, so I didn't sleep well. I won't do anything today. Tomorrow seems to be cloudy. I'm not in a good mood, so I won't do anything tomorrow. Endless years of emptiness had created the unique arrogance of the Silver Moon Council. If a young and promising mage like Duque was placed in the High Elves, wouldn't he be arrogant to the point of death? But for the sake of the Alliance, for the safety of more people, Duque still did it without any hesitation. In a situation where he didn't receive any support. From Servana's point of view, Duque was doing 10 jobs by himself, using his strength and hard work to fill in the gap left by the departure of Aurelia and the Rangers. In this regard, Duque did it flawlessly. They were clearly more than friends but not lovers. Why could his elder sister and Duque trust and tolerate each other so much? His elder sister was willing to go to jail for 3 months for Duque without any regrets. In order to not let his elder sister lose her trust, Duque single-handedly carried the entire line of defense. Servanas, who was biting her lower lip, suddenly felt a little envious of the vague yet sincere relationship between her elder sister and Duque. Looking at Duque's bitter face, Servanas found that he couldn't get angry. Does it hurt? Fortunately, at least it wasn't an axe from the tribe. Duque smiled bitterly. Sylvanas raised her long golden eyebrows. I won't apologize. I will protect you with my life until you leave safely. Duque curled his lips. Queen Sylvanas is really an awkward person. Tonight, as always, Duque used the time difference to defend. Of course, tonight was a little different. The Horde felt that it wasn't good for there to be no progress after so many nights. Tonight, the Horde sent out a few companies of orcs to test the waters. These orc warriors from small clans were basically cannon fodder, so Red Black Hand didn't care about them. A report woke Red up. What? Some soldiers reported that there was no one in the enemy's position at all. It was just a group of mages using Hand of Magic to control the ballistae? Red immediately realized his mistake. The humans had long been unable to hold on, but in order to let more people evacuate, they adopted the strategy of using elites to cover the rear. Immediately send the Black Fury, Wind Raven and Red Feather clans to attack overnight. Red casually yelled out a few names of small clans that he almost couldn't remember himself. A total of only 5,000 people launched an attack to test the waters. Although an hour later, there were reports of heavy casualties among the attacking troops, but more accurate reports came in. There were no soldiers in all the human sniping positions. It was estimated that one or a few mages were using Hand of Magic to control the ballistae and various kinds of crossbows back and forth at high speed. The current Red Black Hand was far from the boss-level guy in the future. At least he was a qualified commander. He immediately realized the intention of the humans. Since this natural stronghold couldn't be defended, then more troops should be withdrawn back to Torrential Fortress and layers of defense. The more soldiers the humans withdrew now, the harder it would be to attack Torrential Fortress, the capital of the humans in the Arthi Highlands. Mobilize the entire army. When the sun rises, we will attack. In the urgent sound of the bugle, the tribes began to assemble. The army from the various military camps in the rear areas of the wetlands converged on the south bank of Sauter Bridge. Nearly 100,000 orc laborers were spurred to pile up a large number of large stones used to fill the sea, ready to fill up the last stretch of the channel at dawn for the army to pass through. Cold light flashed in the darkness, and the long fangs of the orcs glowed with a bloodthirsty dark light under the moonlight. In the anxious waiting, the sun finally rose. Red waved his hand, and the bugler blew a heavy horn. Woo woo woo. It urged the orcs to bite the last of the human troops to cover the rear. As Rend had expected, almost all the positions were empty. There were no skilled craftsmen left, and the last group of craftsmen had already evacuated last night. At least 10 hours. They left behind everything that would slow them down. The scout's report made Red Black Hand's face darken. A group of strong craftsmen, prepared to evacuate in the dark without any burden, even if they were slow, 10 hours would be enough for them to travel 50 kilometers. Maybe in 3 hours, they could reach Riptide Castle, 100 kilometers away. Let the Wolf Riders cross Sauter Bridge at full speed, Chase. Catch up as much as you can. The wolf riders riding huge war wolves waved their huge machetes and galloped across the bridge, accompanied by the roars of the war wolves. Even though most of the war wolves' huge and sharp claws were retracted into the pads of their feet, the claws that were still exposed scraped the hard bridge surface, making a harsh sound. Thousands of wolf riders were about to pass through the position at the north end of the bridge. At this moment, on the position that had clearly been investigated by the scouts and was already empty, all the ballistae and preloaded arrows suddenly moved. Manipulating them was, naturally, the hands of magic that emitted a soft arcane glow. Ambush! The leading wolf rider captain let out a shuddering roar. It was too late. In the next second, the entire sky was filled with the harsh sound of sharp arrows breaking through the wind. Who would have thought that there would be an ambush on this position that had been investigated by the scouts? The wolf riders were a pure offensive unit, with strong attack power, speed, and endurance, but the armor of the wolf riders was still only at the light cavalry level. Encountering this kind of deliberate ambush, no less than 3,000 wolf riders were immediately annihilated. Countless arrows pierced through the weak leather armor of the wolf riders and shot into the bodies of the wolf riders and war wolves, but there was nowhere to hide in the narrow passage in the middle of the position and on the bridge. Those arrows, as if they had eyes, accurately shot into their vitals. Chapter 334. If he could kill it with one arrow, he would never use a second arrow. Rend Blackhand's heart was bleeding. Compared to the red dragons that were forced to go to the battlefield and didn't know how long they could last, the wolf riders were the core troops of the tribe. War wolves had been fighting with the orcs for at least tens of thousands of years. They were the most capable companions, hunting helpers, and the strongest warriors of the orcs. In the past battles with humans, as long as there was a state of melee, the wolf riders formed by orcs and wargs could often fight human cavalry with a high exchange ratio of more than 1:5, or even 1:10. The wolf riders were definitely the pride of the tribe. Unfortunately, wargs were not so easy to feed. A strong adult warg could weigh more than a ton and be a little more than 3 meters tall. Even a wolf's back was 2 meters off the ground. In contrast, the appetite of a warg was astonishing. A warg could feed at least 4 adult orc warriors of 10 powerful clans. Only the most powerful clans that controlled the fattest hunting areas could afford to raise wargs. Only the heavy cavalry from Lordaeron could compete with them. They rode supergiant horses called Light of Lordaeron that could pull 3 tons of cargo. These giant horses also weighed more than a ton and looked like a cross between a horse and an elephant. Their footsteps were heavy, and their hooves sounded like thunder. Although they couldn't sprint for long, they were so powerful in a short sprint that they could knock wargs away. In any case, the wargs were the treasures of the tribe. If it wasn't for the pursuit, how could Ren be willing to send the wolf riders? Well, now they thought they were passing through an abandoned position. Who would have thought that they were charging towards the enemy's position? Almost at the same time, Ren wanted to order the wolf riders to come back. Too late. The solder bridge was not narrow, but that was from the perspective of transportation. If it was a battlefield, the solder bridge would definitely be a narrow path. The wolf riders in the back already felt that something was wrong and wanted to turn back. Unfortunately, it was not that easy. The next moment, after shooting all the preset arrows, Duque's hands of magic floated into the air. 256 hands of magic blasted out the most powerful Frostfire arrow. Some of the clans in the horde had strange resistances. For example, the Blackrock clan generally had fire resistance, while the Frostwolf clan had ice resistance. Too lazy to identify them one by one, Duque directly used the Frostfire arrow that could be used by all classes. No matter how high your resistances are, you're just a Mount Wolf. You can't be like a warlock or a mage with all types of resistances, right? The Frostfire arrow, which was a mixture of white frost, red flame, and arcane purple, was the most terrifying reaper, madly reaping the lives of the wolf riders on the narrow bridge. Or there was a huge explosion that splattered hot flesh and blood. Or perhaps the ice that froze everything froze all life. Or perhaps the brilliance of the arcane spell had disintegrated organic matter. No wolf rider could escape unscathed after being hit. Almost at the same time, a strange buzzing sound came from the north bridgehead. The arrow rang, but the bowstring did not ring. This strange technique could only mean that one person had come, Ranger General Servanas. With her jade-white skin and slender body, the female elf maintained her high-speed movement under the cover of the walls and trenches. She didn't need to maintain an optimal shooting range at all. Any place with good cover would be enough for her to shoot a deadly arrow of death. Unlike her sister's traditional way of thinking, Servanas's tactics were more practical. After the rapid increase in arrow consumption, she no longer stuck to using the light wooden arrows unique to elven rangers, which were made of wood from the arrowhead to the shaft. Instead, she casually used the iron arrowhead arrows commonly used by Arthi Highland archers. Their armor-piercing ability was better, but they did not have the almost silent concealment of the elven ranger's wooden arrows. Very simply, in order to increase the deterrence, Servanas simply asked the craftsman of Riptide Castle to make a batch of simple whistles for her and attached them to the arrowheads. Once shot, they would make a strange buzzing sound. This kind of small whistle would, of course, affect the accuracy, but for Queen Servanas' archery, as long as the target was not more than 100 meters away, the impact would not be big. Anyway, it was used to clean up small fries. Protect the vitals. The wolf riders screamed as soon as they heard the unique sound of the arrow. They immediately used their machetes to protect their throats as much as possible. After days of fighting, they had long understood that the elven ranger opposite them was their nightmare. A dark gray light flashed, and the arrow actually directly pierced through the broad-bladed machete in the hands of a wolf rider, passing through the unlucky fellow's neck. Then, with a violent spray of blood, it hit the shoulder of a wolf rider next to it. Bang! With a muffled sound, the second wolf rider was actually knocked into the body of the third wolf rider. Coincidentally, the frostfire arrow hit the top of the wolf rider's head. Poof! The heads of the two wolf riders were directly blown to pieces. Almost at the same time, the second arrow arrived. In one breath, it pierced through the eyes of a warg, entered from the left, exited from the right, and then shot into the throat of the second warg. 3 people, 2 wargs, died in an instant. Elven hero. The leader of the wolf riders gritted his teeth. Servanas had already turned into a high-speed moving self-propelled cannon, pouring terrifying firepower on the tribe that seemed low-key, but was actually not inferior to Duquesne's. The iron arrows became the scythe of the Grim Reaper, reaping the lives of the orc wolf riders. 2 arrows in 1 second. 3 arrows in 1 string. The only thing that restricted Servanas's firepower was not her own shooting speed, but the lack of arrows. However, if Servanas really shot all the quiver of arrows that she had set up in every corner of the camp, the morale of the orcs would probably collapse first. Within the camp, sharp arrows whizzed through the air. Like Duquesne's magic attacks, they became a death knell for the orcs. Even so, at this moment, the wolf riders also displayed their strength as the core fighting force of the tribe. Heavy casualties. No enemies were seen. The wolf riders still maintained their high morale as they attacked. They were not afraid of death. Even if they were shot to death or blown up, the wargs under them would still bravely charge towards the human camp, searching for traces of the 2 enemies hiding in the dark. Suddenly, there was a change in the human camp. In the air, tall and sturdy elemental creatures were entering the battlefield. Those tall and sturdy creatures that only existed in legends appeared in the air like shadows. There was a large-scale distortion in space. Within the distortion, 3-meter-tall water elemental giants that only had a body and 2 arms, no heads or hands, slowly materialized. The unique spell of ice mages, summon water elemental. The problem was, why the hell did Duque have so many water elemental creatures? When Antonidas summoned water elemental creatures to fight against Ghoul, Dan's demon army, there were only a few dozen of them. But what about Duque? 108 of them. And they were elites. Chapter 335. Was Duque's strength already above Antonidas? Of course not. Antonidas had used his spare magic power to summon the water elementals in order to prevent Ghoul, Dan's minions from interrupting his spellcasting. The core was still the magic itself. The fireballs and ice arrows flying randomly in the air were the real killer moves. Duque did the exact opposite. He thought of himself as a summoner. The magic circuits were operating at full power, and every circuit burst with a bright arcane light. The magic reaction was so strong that the light even penetrated through the muscles and veins of his body, and many of Duque's magic circuit lines could even be seen on the surface of his body. Duque was clearly in a bunker on the defensive line, but there was an illusion that the light was going to penetrate the outside of the bunker. Gavin, Rad, and Elugia, who were guarding near Duque, were shocked. They had never heard of Duque's spellcasting method of squeezing out all of his magic power. Just like how a person could not exert 500 pounds of force just because he had 500 pounds of strength, the power of the magic circuit could rarely be pushed to the limit. The limit that a person felt was not the limit that they could bear in the real sense. To explore that limit, they needed to practice, analyze, perceive, and improve themselves bit by bit. Similarly, there were many mages who accidentally went overboard when exploring their own limits, and their original magic circuits were overloaded and burned. Duque's pushing was the limit, but it felt like he was walking on a high wire. 98%, 99%, 99. 99%, 99%. That kind of exquisite control made Elucia gape and tongue-tied. He could overload and die at any time, but he lingered on the edge of the gate to hell like a horse on a cliff, refusing to take even half a step in. The effect was obvious. One after another, huge circular magic circles unfolded in the air above the top of the bunker. The magic waves were so strong that Elugia could feel them even through the thick stone layer. The magic array slowly rotated in a clockwise direction, and the lines constructed by the arcane light expanded along the magic array, rapidly expanding the area of the magic array. Glug glug. With a strange sound, a huge, translucent, illusory waterfall appeared in the air. It was a huge drain with a width of more than 50 meters. Copious amounts of water poured down from the sky. There should have been a sound like a landslide or a tsunami, but in fact, there was no sound at all. Ah! Elucia let out a low cry. Did all the water disappear? No, the water had already entered the bodies of some elemental creatures. In the world that mortals could not see with their naked eyes, Elugia could clearly see the huge waterfall split into 256. He constructed 256 huge water elementals. 10 seconds later, the water elements crossed the boundary between the illusory elemental world and the Azeroth material world, appearing in front of the orcs. Therefore, it looked as if water elements had appeared from the void. The wolf cavalrymen were petrified. For a moment, they didn't even know whether to continue attacking or to retreat from the narrow bridge in a sorry state. In fact, no matter which choice they made, it was a dead end. They could only watch helplessly as death approached them step by step. Through the firing hole in the bunker, Gavin Raid saw the water elementals on a killing spree. The biggest characteristic of elemental creatures was that their core was an element. If the elemental group was not destroyed, there was not much meaning in simply physically destroying its body. If you cut a ball of water with a knife, could you cut the water in two and kill the water? If you smashed the arm of the earth elemental giant with a hammer, it would not be able to withstand the earth elemental's call. The earth would rise from the ground and automatically repair its body. The key to dealing with elemental creatures was to destroy the energy structure of its elemental core. The wolf cavalrymen were in a difficult situation. They had wanted to rush up, find Duque, and kill Duque with a knife. Who would have thought that there would be so many impenetrable water elementals coming out? And they were King elites. Knives could not cut them, and the wolf teeth could not bite them to death. Against the impenetrable water elementals, the wolf cavalrymen could only try their best to avoid them. But the water elementals could still shoot frost arrows. The entire northern position of the bridge fell into a one-sided massacre. Let's go. There was a clear weakness in Duque's voice. Elucia looked at Duque and said to Gavin Raid, I don't have much magic left. I'll support Master. You open the way and cover us. Duque felt that something was wrong. The unexpected feeling of weakness forced him to put half of his body on Alicia's soft but firm shoulder. Gavin Raid did not waste any time. He pulled out his hammer and strode ahead to open the way. His and Alicia's worries were a little unnecessary. With the protection of the water elemental army and Servanas, the god of death, it was impossible for any orcs to get close. When they saw a large number of water elementals emerging from the position, Zulahid's dragon cavalrymen also did not dare to get close. After a few turns, it actually did not take much time. Duque and his party had already passed through the tunnel under the hill. They came to the back of the hill. The view in front of them suddenly opened up. 100 fully armed Highland Knights of Riptide Castle were waiting there. After Duque sent away 80% of them without anyone noticing, these promised knight candidates had already come to Duque and swore their loyalty to Duque. Duque also followed the ancient etiquette and used the magic staff he inherited from Mediv, the incomplete Atish, to touch the shoulders of these knights on both sides. The official knighthood ceremony was to touch the left and right shoulders with a long sword. Firstly, Duque was a pharaoh, and the rule of the mage lords was to use a staff instead of a long sword. Secondly, Duque only now realized that he did not even have a suitable staff other than the head of Atish. In order to show respect, he had to tie a sandalwood stick to Atish and use it as a temporary staff. What made Duque's head hurt the most was that even though it was only the head of Atish, it actually provided a magic boost that surpassed all the common goods on the market. No matter what, the swearing ceremony was sacred. King Salas even snuck over to witness the ceremony with his own eyes. He then rushed back through the night. When 100 of them were raised and lowered in unison, when the neat and uniform movements were displayed in front of him, he could not help but feel a thrilling power in his heart, and he had the urge to immediately cheer. Greetings to our Lord, Grand Duke Marcus. The uniform roar pierced through everyone's eardrums like thunder. That's right. These outstanding knights were now Duque's strength. Duque smiled. Let's go, we're going to give the orcs a big gift. Big gift? What kind of gift? A gift that could cause more casualties than the thousands of soldiers who volunteered to cover the retreat? Although the knights were extremely determined, everyone was curious and excited about the big gift that Duque mentioned. Chapter 336. After crossing the Sodder Bridge and entering the earthy highlands, one only had to follow the road that curved towards the west to arrive at the main city of the Stromgarde Kingdom, Torrentburg. As the ancient capital of the Arathor Empire more than 2,000 years ago, a thick dirt road that had been trampled by countless people, horses, and all kinds of animals for thousands of years. At this moment, anyone who stared at the road would find that the road was shaking. Not only the dirt road, but the entire land was shaking, as if a waiter was serving a glass of beer to a customer on a tray. No, the entire Arthi Highlands seemed to be trembling slightly. If one could look down from above, they would see that there were 3 groups of people running wildly on the road. The first group was nearly 10,000 infantry and craftsmen from Torrentburg. After a night of rapid marching, they were less than 20 kilometers away from Torrentburg. The Highland cavalry of Torrentburg were not far from them, and there were constantly mounted scouts scouting behind them. Similarly, there were also a small number of Griffin cavalry joining the scouting ranks. There were not many people in the middle group, only a pitiful 100 riders and 1 carriage. The last group was a sea of green orcs. At least 30,000 orcs were less than half a kilometer away from the middle group, trying to catch up with them and tear them to pieces. It was not that the middle group was faster, but whenever a wolf rider got within 300 meters of the middle group, there would be a long arrow piercing the dawn. The shining arrowhead was like a black shuttle, and all the lights slid past it with a sharp whistling sound. No matter if the person dodged or blocked, they would definitely be shot in the vital parts and killed. In the back of the carriage, there was a man with a bow. His golden hair was flying, and his green ranger cloak was a flag. That flag represented a name that everyone in the tribe knew, Servanas. And in front of the whole group, there was a knight shining with holy golden light, holding a flag high. The flag's design was very simple. It was a blue storm that looked like a tornado. To the orcs, this flag was no stranger. It represented another enemy of the orcs, the human mage hero, Duke Marcus. The Alliance clearly had many other flags, but the simple-minded beastmen only remembered a few. Duke's blue storm flag was the one that left the deepest impression. They were so frantic in their pursuit of Duke that they did not even realize that they had already left the mainland and were running towards the northern part of the Arthi Highlands. The orcs were foolish, but the knights who had just joined Duke were not. Why did Duke do this? Wasn't it to distract the orcs and prevent them from catching up with the retreating soldiers of Riptide Castle? Even if they had sworn their allegiance, their origins would not change. Their memories were still haunted by the deep feelings they had for the Arthi Highlands. In a moment of excitement, the blue storm flag in their eyes changed. It was as if it had become the battle flag of Thoradin the Great that shone on the battlefield 2,800 years ago. Duke's slender figure seemed to overlap with the legendary Thoradin the Great. Just as lofty and great. Just as selflessness that crossed the boundaries of clans and nations. For the sake of the future of the human race, he stood at the front line against the foreign races without complaint or regret. The eyes of the knights quietly became moist. Soon, their moist eyes widened in shock. The sun was high up in the sky. The vast mountains to the north of the Arthi Highlands were already covered by the sun's rays, breaking through the misty morning fog. Everything on the highlands was dyed with golden light. But in the distance, the outline of an incomparably huge human figure could be faintly seen. "My lord, we can't go any further. That is one of the few forbidden areas on the Arthi Highlands." "There's a knight," cautioned Duke. Duke smiled mysteriously. "Are you talking about Fosric? That's the one I'm looking for." The knight was completely dumbfounded. "What? My lord is looking for trouble with Fosric?" The sunlight was like a violent giant axe, splitting the clouds in the sky and pouring down on the earth. On the Arthi Highlands, green grass was everywhere. Spring flowers dotted the entire highland grassland. But on the grassland, a dazzling bright green covered the natural green of the grassland. Tens of thousands of orcs in newly made armor marched side by side. Innumerable crude war flags were reflected in the vision of Duke and his knights. They were scribbled as usual. Each of them was painted with symbols that could only be understood by orcs. From the partridge to the lion, to the axe, to the hammer, to the broken or the good hammer, there was no repetition in any of them. The only one that Duke could recognize was a war flag marked with a long black tooth. Blacktooth clan. After their father, Blackhand, was killed by Anduin Lothar, Rend and his brother Maim insisted that Orgrim was the one who killed their father. They swore to take back the power and position that belonged to their father from Orgrim's hands. Their idea was publicly supported by many orcs. In order to avoid a civil war and to show that he had a clear conscience, Orgrim acquiesced to all of this. Thus, the Blacktooth clan was born. The Blackrock clan was once the #1 clan among the orcs. They had so many warriors and were so powerful. Even though there was a split, they were still very powerful. Orgrim took the most elite Blackrock clan warriors to the hinterlands, and the rest joined Rend's Blacktooth clan. The commander of the southern front, Rend Blackhand, rode a huge black wolf and rode out of the crowd. He was rather confident in his own reflexes and strength. He brought his 12 personal guards and approached Duke and his knights who were lined up in a row at high speed. Rend Blackhand suddenly stopped 100 meters away. "Duke Marcus, today is the day you die. Seeing that you, a coward, are finally willing to face your death, I will not cut off your head as a trophy of war. The head of a schemer is not worthy of becoming my military medal." Duke clenched his teeth and thought to himself, "Damn, I'm really being looked down on." Duke laughed loudly. "Ha, you want my head? You can talk after you defeat my servant, Fosric." Suddenly, it wasn't just Randall, even the beastmen behind him felt the earth tremble. It was the sound of a single creature's loud footsteps. To have such heavy and thunderous footsteps, it must be an unimaginably huge creature. Sure enough, in the orc's vision, an incomparably huge stone giant appeared with heavy footsteps. This giant was 30 meters tall, its body made of metal and a large number of stones. Its clenched fist was as big as Rend's tent. He was the taboo of the Arthi Highlands, Stone Giant Fazruk. Chapter 337. Day after day, year after year, the stone giant Fezruk wandered around the Arthi Highlands. No Arthi knew what he did. He never attacked people, but once he was attacked, he would tell you what the wrath of a giant was. Thousands of years had passed since ancient times. Countless people had tried to kill Fezruk to obtain the legendary treasure. Some had even gathered several powerful radiant moon mages to encircle and kill the stone giant. No one had succeeded? They had succeeded. In historical records, at least 3 groups of people had succeeded in killing it. In the end, there was nothing. There were no treasures, no clues to any treasures, only worthless stones and a large pile of iron ore. However, after a few days, the stone giant Fezruk came back to life, forgetting about the humans who had attacked and killed him. He seemed to wander around the designated area of the Arthi Highlands in a daze. But the orcs did not know this story. Hearing the orc leader threaten Duke in the common language, and Duke shamelessly claiming that Fezruk was his servant, the knights around Duke all understood what kind of person their master was. Damn it. He's full of evil tricks. But we like it. A boss who can kill the orcs is a good boss. Those who were wary of mages as lords naturally did not choose to follow Duke. Those who were willing to follow him were, of course, mentally prepared. Moreover, after fighting with the orcs for so long, they had more or less lost friends and family in battle. Seeing that the orcs were about to occupy more than half of the Arthi Highlands, how could the knights be in a good mood? In the end, the actor Duke, with a group of extras, walked past the stone giant. As he walked past, Duke did not forget to shout, "Kill him, Fezruk." In the carriage, Elucia, who was standing behind Duke, was so nervous that her heart was about to fly out of her chest. She could not help but tightly pull on the corner of Duke's shirt. Duke was stunned. He was a little unhappy at first, but seeing Elucia's expression, which looked like she was about to cry but did not dare to, Duke could only comfort her softly. "Don't worry, Fazruk won't take the initiative to attack." What if we accidentally touch it?" Elucia's eyes were filled with tears. Duque patted Sylvanas on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, Sylvanas has misled." Queen Sylvie glared at Duque, clearly saying, "You're full of bad ideas." Seeing Sylvana's expression, Elucia calmed down a little. Sure enough, Duque's group quickly passed through without any danger. On the other hand, the stone giant, Fezruk, continued to march forward in the direction of the Horde's army. If today's commander-in-chief was not the young and energetic Red Black Hand, but a more mature tribal chief, he would definitely not act so rashly. Unfortunately, there were no ifs in this world. Let the dragon cavalry attack. Rant's order was relayed to the Dragonmaw Beastman dragon riders hovering in the air. It just so happened that Zulud was on a different front today. The Horde missed this last chance to avoid making a mistake. In order to show off his strength and his leadership that was not inferior to his father, Black Hand, he only ordered the dragon riders to attack Fezruk instead of Duque's group. Perhaps he felt that Sylvanas's arrows were still a threat to the dragon riders. Or perhaps he thought that killing the stone giant, which Duque relied on the most, would deeply affect the morale of Duque's group. Anyway, tens of thousands of orcs entered into a spectator mode, watching a dozen red dragons fight the stone giant. Fezruk was very strong. A creature that could truly be called a giant was not weak. After being attacked, it immediately launched a fierce counterattack. Huge rocks smashed the bones of several red dragons, causing them to let out miserable cries before falling to the ground. After a full 15 minutes, after paying the price of the lives of 12 young red dragons, the stone giant Fezruk fell and turned into a pile of burning rubble. Ha! Did you see that? Duke Marcus? This is the fate of the powerful elemental creature you rely on. Stupid, despicable man, what other tricks do you have up your sleeve? Why don't you use them all at once? Rant's loud laughter aroused the orcs' cheers. Their wild laughter was so loud that it was as if the whole world was laughing at Duque's overconfidence. No one noticed that Sylvanas's agile and fast figure had flashed next to the stone giant Fezruk's body, took something, and then quickly returned to Duque's side. Duke tossed a small stick that glowed with a dull earthen glow to Gavin Rard beside him. Yo, Gavin Rad, do you remember the series of tasks I gave you? Ugh. Gavin Rad recalled the task Duque gave him before he came to the Arthi Highlands, and still felt a headache. In the northern mountains of the Arthi Highlands, the loyal paladin Gavin Rad followed the great hoodwinker Du's instructions to find the whereabouts of a princess. The poor princess was imprisoned under a huge crystal. Her voice was soft and sweet, as if she was crying and complaining, begging the just paladin for help. This scene was like the reappearance of countless fairy tales. The princess was in trouble, but where was the brave prince? Something was not right. Why would a princess be imprisoned in a place like this? He had never heard of any princesses from the 7 major human kingdoms, dwarves, or elves going missing. But since it was a task Duque had instructed him to complete, Gavin Rad had no choice but to obey. In the following days, the paladin almost broke his legs from running around. He went to bully the kobolds and collect Mizral's dust. Then he went to fight some messy small elemental creatures and unlock the jailer stone. Finally, the mysterious princess's instructions were to deal with the biggest mystery of the Arthi Highlands, the stone giant Fezruk. Gavin Rad still remembered the princess's last request in a clear voice. The opening of the jailer's stone has basically unlocked these things that are binding me, but there is still an unbreakable lock that prevents me from moving. Do you see the key stone in this circle of stones? The key to open the lock is in the hands of Fezruk. He is one of the giants that imprison me and also the guardian of this stone lock. You must obtain a key called Magic Wand of Order from Fezruk to open the key stone. You have already done so much for me, great knight. Just one more insignificant favor. I will be even more grateful to you. Unknowingly, the consecutive tasks were about to be completed. Although he did not know what kind of princess it was, he was a knight that saved the princess. Gavin Rad was a little excited just thinking about it. Chapter 338. Duque patted the shoulder of Gavin Rad, an aristocratic paladin. Trust me, the princess of Azeroth is most likely a trap. In his mind, Duque silently replaced the most with all. The young man Gavin Rad's face was filled with endless confusion. Sir Marcus knows what kind of princess is down there? What is it? Her voice is so beautiful, then why? Duque said righteously, the creator is fair. Most people with a beautiful voice are not beautiful. Most people with a beautiful voice do not have a beautiful voice. Those with a beautiful voice and a beautiful face. Well, the probability is very small. Besides, when you heard the title, Princess of the Earth, did you really not associate it with the elemental system? Gavin Rad's face instantly turned pale. At the same time, a terrible roar came from under the circle of stones. In the previous game, the Princess of the Earth suddenly appeared like a flash. Now, in the real world of Azeroth, the appearance of the Princess of the Earth was, of course, very real. On the piece of land that was the focus of tens of thousands of people, the Earth was shaking violently. It was as if a huge active volcano had suddenly been born under the ground. There was a faint shaking sound, as if a lava behemoth covered in flames and magma was about to break out of its cage. Gavin Rad suddenly found that in several other places in the Arthi Highlands, bright pillars of light rose into the sky, and those places happened to be where he had been before. Those were the places where the outer confinement magic circles were located. Obviously, the unknown terrifying creature that called itself Princess was breaking the last shackles under the ground. Not good. A despicable human trap. Retreat. Everyone retreat. Rant shouted loudly. He really did not believe in Duque's integrity. Just over half a year ago, he had seen with his own eyes that Duque had ignited the whole of Stormwind City and pulled 100,000 Blackrock compatriots into a fiery hell. Everything was not right, and with the great chief's order to retreat, the Beastman army suddenly fell into a panic. Everyone, whether it was the wolf cavalrymen who were eager to avenge their fallen companions or the Beastman warriors who were advancing on foot, was a little confused. Then they turned around and fled in a panic. In their minds, as long as they stayed away from the strange stone fence, everything would be fine. My lord, it's time to retreat. Duke's knight hurriedly shouted. Duke, it's too close. It was Gavin Rad's voice. Duke! Queen Sylvie shouted with concern. Elucia quietly tugged at the corner of Duke's clothes. Duke was the only one who was incomparably calm and collected. His face was as calm as the wind and clouds. Oh no, it was a pretentious expression of someone who forcefully turned into ashes while talking and laughing. Under his feet, a small iceberg was emerging, lifting Duke's figure high up, so that every knight could see him, and every blockhead who dared to turn his head could see his figure. Retreat? What retreat? I'm the one who created this trap. How could I be the one to fall into it? This is the third time I've laid a trap to exterminate the orcs. From now on, I want every orc to tremble at the sound of my name. I want every orc to never dare to fight against the humans. I want every orc to crawl under the feet of the humans and accept justice. I want them to pay the price for the orcs' invasion and massacre of the intelligent races in the world of Azeroth. I want the name of the Alliance to resound through heaven and hell. Along with Duke's loud and clear declaration, Gavin Rad, Elucia, Sylvanas, and the 100 Knights all raised their heads high. If it were anyone else who said this, they would be a braggart who could do nothing but brag. But he was Duke Marcus, the acknowledged master of battle tactics and strategies in the entire Eastern Kingdom and the entire Alliance. There was an uncontrollable sense of excitement in their hearts, making everyone's blood boil. There was no more uneasiness, no more fear. Especially the 100 Knights, they were filled with anticipation. They stared unblinkingly into the distance, waiting for the scene of the orcs' destruction that was about to unfold. The thing under the ground was approaching the surface at high speed. When the rumbling sound got closer to the stone fence, the source of the sound suddenly changed direction, choosing to break through the ground from another direction. No, how is this possible? Rend Blackhand was horrified to find that the thing had actually turned, and was heading towards the densest area of the orcs. Duke teased, saying something that the people around him could not understand. A level 44 elite is a little weak. I purposely wanted to strengthen her, why wouldn't she accept it? As the loud sound from the ground approached the surface, all the orcs looked down at their feet. All of a sudden, the ground that was already shaking flashed, as if the sun was shining on the entire battlefield. But the light was not actually the reflection of the sun, but the radiance of the magic circle on the ground. The trap. It's definitely a trap. Along with the dazzling yellow radiance that gushed out from the ground, a huge hole finally opened up in the ground, and a huge female palm made of marble suddenly broke out of the ground. The moment it came out, it crushed more than 10 orcs to death. The next second, the huge forearm that came out of the ground was a full 25 meters long. With just a sweep, at least 3 orcs died a violent death. The sky and the ground were covered with the remains of orc warriors. Blood splattered like a waterfall on the heads and bodies of the orcs who had not yet escaped the danger zone. Broken limbs spun in the air, and spattered organs stained the bodies of the wargs not far away. The once ferocious and mighty giant wargs had all become squandering dogs in the face of this even more terrifying and huge unknown existence. They tucked their tails between their legs, let out timid cries, and ran away madly. Unfortunately, it was too late. Along with the dazzling radiance that gushed out from the magic array, it was too late. Along with the dazzling light that gushed out from the magic circle, there was only a deep valley left on the edge of the huge magic circle. There was only so much soil on the ground. When one side cracked, the excess soil would definitely rise up due to the pressure on the other side. Where did the soil go? They continued to rise and then combined into a huge round barrier that looked like a flower bud that had not bloomed yet. The barrier that covered the sky and the sun was more than 200 meters high, trapping at least 30,000 tribes on the dark round ground. With no hope of escaping, all the orcs that were still alive could not help but turn around and stare at the terrifying existence that had even come out of the ground with its entire arm more than 50 meters long. The orcs' hearts were beating wildly in fear. What the hell is coming out? Chapter 339. The terrifying existence that emerged from the ground finally broke through the soil and crawled out of the ground. Like a landslide, a large amount of soil that seemed to be able to fill up the entire solder strait fell from her gigantic body. The splash sound was reminiscent of a rainstorm. Her figure was so huge that every orc had to raise their heads to the limit to see her full face. It was a female stone giant that was more than 100 meters tall. She had a rough human face, with a terrible brandy nose in the middle of her face. He had short flaxen hair, which was passable. Aside from her low looks, her body proportions were not bad. At least she was presentable. She wore a long white dress made of an unknown material. She did look like a princess. Unfortunately, her thick and strong limbs were not acceptable to human aesthetics. When her towering skyscraper-like body was fully revealed in front of the orcs, everyone felt a huge pressure descend on the battlefield. A very pleasant and clear voice with a strong sense of mockery resounded throughout the battlefield. "He, foolish and insignificant mortals. Thank you for saving me, the great Princess Misral, from that damned imprisonment. As thanks for your foolishness and ignorance, I will kill all of you." Kekik, after seeing the image of the princess he had saved through the magician's eye, Gavinrad, one of the 5 holy knights, cursed. "Bastard! Give me back my beautiful dream. Damn it! What kind of princess is this? I don't believe in love anymore." Gavinrad's only consolation was that he was not the fool who had summoned Princess Misral and then beaten up by the princess. "Ha! Gavinrad, why don't you go have a date with your precious princess?" Queen Sylvanas bent over and laughed heartily. "Hoo-hoo!" Illusia covered her mouth like a lady, obviously trying to hold back her laughter. Only Duque, who had already seen through everything, comforted the poor girl. "Dear Holy Knight, have you forgotten the virtue of a holy knight? A holy knight will not act for the sake of rewards. Or do you think that the ones who need to be sealed or imprisoned are ordinary humans? No, I think it might be a high elf that isn't recognized by Silvery Moon City." Gavinrad immediately received a supercilious look from Queen Shi. This first generation of the 5 holy knights had obviously been taught a lesson by Queen Sylvanas in the name of learning from each other. He immediately became dispirited. Duque gave Gavinrad a look that said, "You're a man, you can't back down." Gavinrad rolled his eyes. "If you're so good, why don't you go?" Duque curled his lips and looked at his mage badge. "I'm a gentleman." Gavinrad rolled his eyes for the second time. F***CK. The tribe's southern front army is in trouble. The Dragon Maw Beastman cavalryman hovering in the sky only had this thought as he saw this scene. Rend Blackhand, who was trapped in the huge stone wall, suddenly realized that he and his men had been tricked by Duque. This bullshit princess was definitely an elemental creature. Whether he and his men were willing or not, they had to fight this female giant fiercely. Rend turned around in shock and anger, shouting at his men with his mouth wide open. Unfortunately, in the glaring earthy yellow light caused by the elemental summoning, the female giant's laughter drowned out all the orcs' voices. Shouts, curses, and the sound of drums and horns conveying orders were all drowned out by the female giant's pleasant but domineering voice. "Ha! You stupid green-skinned humans, do you think you can get a treasure from me? All right, I'll show you my treasure." Princess Misral laughed and waved her arms as if she was doing a stretching exercise. After a series of strange explosions, all the orcs shut their mouths. Everyone saw a lot of water and fire elemental giants appearing around them. Everyone saw the fear on their companions' faces. They saw their mouths opening and closing, but they couldn't make a sound like they wanted to scream out loud. There was no Loktar for victory. There was no Gramash for the heart of a giant that symbolized courage. There was only dead silence and despair. No one could make a sound, except for the weak trembling sound of their fangs colliding when they clenched their teeth. The drawback of the tribe's declining combat power finally showed itself. If this was the original elite led by Blackhand, they would have rushed forward with heavy weapons at this moment. Even if they died, they would not be afraid. If the leader was a famous chieftain of the tribe, a great hero like Hellscream or Deadeye, the orcs would also have a backbone. Unfortunately, it was Rend Blackhand, a small chief of a new clan who had yet to prove himself. Perhaps he had an excellent bloodline, but no orc would recognize Rend's bravery before he had any achievements. Rend raised his arms and shouted, but his voice was muffled. Stone Edge Exiles. These were Princess Mizral's summon creatures. Unlike the original version, these Stone Edge Exiles, made up of various elemental creatures, were also strengthened. Yes, that huge elemental amplification magic circle was Duke's work. Duke not only strengthened the princess, but also strengthened the princess's summoned creatures. Otherwise, the princess would have only unsealed the original stone fence and not come out from under the feet of the orcs. Like the most professional terrorist, Duke had even predicted the orcs' reactions. He lured Mizral out in the core area where they had retreated, and in order to create the effect of closing the door and beating the dog, Duke attached a magic model to the magic circle. Yes, a certain prince's ultimate skill, Heavens Fall, Earth Shatter. Now, Mizral's minions showed their power. The blazing fireballs brought with them the sound of explosions as they crisscrossed across the enclosed battlefield. Not only were there deadly fireball spells, but there were also Frost Nova and Lightning Shield spells. The spells that the High Elves and humans had painstakingly learned were, in fact, the natural skills of elemental creatures. Of course, they were not as good as the elemental creatures. Huge fireballs exploded on the grass. Regardless of whether they hit anyone or not, a chaotic gust of wind mixed with flesh and soil would immediately follow. Even the most courageous beastmen couldn't help but subconsciously stop moving. Terrifying shockwaves, some white and some yellow, were like drops of water falling on a calm lake during a rainstorm. The bright rings spread out one after another. However, any of the bright rings represented death and destruction. Whether it was the burly orcs or the huge wolves that weighed more than a ton, they were all sent flying by the shockwaves of the elemental magic explosion. If they were unlucky and encountered several shockwaves at the same time, they would really die without a complete corpse. Chapter 340. According to Duke's instructions, Elysia was doing a magic transmission broadcast. On the other side of the transmission mirror, the voice of King Salas Trollbane came. Duke, you are the eternal brother of the people of Torrent Castle. No one knew better than Salas the significance of Duke taking care of these orcs. The more elite orcs Duke killed, the easier it would be for them to defend Torrent Castle. Torrent Castle was indeed easy to defend and difficult to attack. No isolated city could be defended forever. To the west and south of Torrent Castle were cliffs facing the sea. In fact, at the bottom of the cliff was a beach. The Alliance, who controlled the sea, could still go there through the sea and even the eastern beach of South Shore, and supply Torrent Castle through the secret passage at the bottom of the cliff. Therefore, Torrent Castle was definitely not an isolated city. When a system prompt came in the spiritual world, your reputation in Torrent Castle is fixed at worship. Then Duke snapped his fingers. Let's go. Go. Where are we going? Asked Sylvanas. It's time to go to the hinterlands. I think there should be news from there. Then, what about this princess of the earth? Duke glanced at the image transmitted by the mage's eyes. Inside, Mizral was on a killing spree. The corners of Duke's mouth curved into a wicked smile. Second sister, you have been with me for so long, you should have learned to trust me, right? Get lost. Who is your second sister? If it weren't for the fact that there were many people around Duke, Sylvanas would definitely teach Duke a lesson. In fact, not only did Queen Sylvanas not understand, but Elysia and the other knights also did not understand. Here, it was Gavin Rad who was the clearest about Duke's deeds. He knew that he had to be a bootlicker, and now was the time to shine. Sir Marcus's plan is the most sophisticated. If I'm not wrong, the magic array's effect on Princess Mizral has a time limit. None of the people present were fools. Everyone understood. Damn it. Sinister indeed. Making an earth elemental princess, who had been sealed for who knows how many years and was obviously not a good person, fight to the death with the horde. Then, when the Horde and the Earth Elemental Princess were about to fight to the death, they directly cancelled the bonus. This is too despicable, shameless, and vulgar. However, we love it. Duque's group left lightly. He didn't confirm the result of the battle, and he left right in front of the tribe's dragon riders. Servanas was sitting on the roof of the carriage with his bow in hand. It was obvious that he was ready to shoot anyone who dared to come near. In a situation where they didn't dare to attack recklessly, the Dragon Maw clan's cavalry practically sent Duque off. The soldiers of the Wall of Thoradin watched as Duque's group slowly approached, followed by dozens of flying dragons in the air, all of them dumbstruck. The guard on duty really didn't know whether to open the door or not. Open the door! At this moment, the appearance of the Supreme Commander of the Wall of Thoradin, General Abendis, made the pressured guards sigh in relief. Abendis rubbed his eyebrows and smiled bitterly at his subordinates without concealing it. I thought that only Lothar was a true warrior, but I didn't expect the devilish genius Duque to also have such astonishing courage. With the two of them, Stormwind doesn't have to worry about restoring its country. Alright, let the Griffins move out to welcome our heroes. But the Griffins are no match for the flying dragons. Abendis' adjutant reminded. Idiot, if those fools really dare to go against you, can't you fly close to Deputy Commander Marcus at a low altitude? The High Elves goddess of archery is there. Looking at Servanas, Abendis had indescribable envy. That was the highest level Elven Ranger hero. It might not be so in a plain battle, but once it entered the jungle battle that Rangers excelled at, this level of Ranger was a godlike existence. Heavy armored infantrymen, mages, strong orcs, in her eyes, there was no difference at all. With enough time and arrows, she could single-handedly destroy an entire army. On the surface, they said that they were here to support Lothar, but in reality, they had been following Duque all along and no one could command them. Alright, if I had to choose, I'd rather have a ranger heroine than a princess. Of course, Abendis only dared to say this to himself. If he dared to say it out loud, King Tyrrhena's would definitely make life difficult for him. After passing through the Wall of Thoradin, Duque quickly marched to Terran Mill. The current Terran Mill was far from the dead town ruled by the Forsaken. There was no messy poisonous gas, and there were no eerie bones. Terran Mill was now just a territory under the rule of Alterac and the Bara family. At this moment, a large army was gathering on both sides of the road south of the town. The leader of the army was holding a golden lion flag on a blue background, which clearly showed that this army belonged to the Stormwind army. King Lang stood straight on the back of his horse like a sharp sword. The fallen king, who had once lost his capital like a stray dog, now looked very different. Loyal knights surrounded him and protected him. Behind him, there were at least 50,000 elite infantrymen. From afar, a scout on a hill waved his hand. A smile appeared on Lang's determined face. Line up. As soon as the order was given, the messenger immediately blew the horn. The soldiers who were originally resting on the side of the road performed perfectly. They did not panic at all. Every one of them seemed to be an automatic puzzle piece guided by an inexplicable force. In an instant, they found their positions and formed a long and straight square formation. Their armor was well fastened to their bodies. Because they were marching, every soldier only wore half-body armor. However, the shields on their hands were well strapped. As long as there was the slightest sign of trouble, they could immediately pull out their swords and raise their shields, forming a solid shield wall with their comrades. The soldiers who were close to the inside of the formation would immediately raise their spears, turning the formation into a big hedgehog. The commanders of the various platoons stepped out and began to inspect the formation of their subordinates. In fact, they were only there to supervise the formation. The squad leaders of each squad had already restrained their subordinates well. In just 10 minutes, an orderly marching formation had appeared on both sides of the road. At this time, a small group of cavalry galloped over from afar. Seeing this scene from afar, Lang and General Tom Simois showed obvious joy. Not only them, but every Stormwind Knight also showed a warm smile. Chapter 341. At the very front of the group was a man and a woman. The woman was an elven ranger, her pride and wildness comparable to the stars in the sky. Her impressive battle record gave her a graceful bearing. Including the dragon riders flying in the sky, she had killed close to 4 digits, which was enough to make her the archer army of the entire alliance. The man was an excessively young wizard. The star emblem on his left chest told everyone that he was a rare young morning star wizard. However, the most eye-catching thing about him was his composure and carefreeness. It was as if he could annihilate thousands of troops just by talking and laughing merrily. Every single soldier was deeply attracted by his unparalleled demeanor. Moreover, the brilliance of wisdom in his eyes revealed his commander's temperament without a doubt. Lang sighed softly. Lothar did well in Silverpine Forest. General Seamus replied, "Yes. Commander Lothar was born to be a commander." While Duque was busy with the Battle of the Arthi Highlands, Lothar had indeed done well there. He made use of the Horde's eagerness to expand their living space, pretending that the defensive line had collapsed. After sacrificing nearly 100 kilometers of defensive line in the south of Silverpine Forest, he organized all the cavalry to wrap the orcs in a dumpling. Then, with the help of the FFF's flamethrower unit, they surrounded and killed 50,000 orc warriors in one fell swoop. This completely changed the power ratio between the Alliance and the Horde in Silverpine Forest. After this battle, the Horde basically lost the ability to break into Tirisful woodlands. However, with Grom Hellscream choosing to defend to the death, the Alliance's attack on the Horde's camp felt like a mouse trying to pull a turtle. It was already a blessing for a country to have a commander. Who would have thought that the 2 most dazzling commanders in the entire Alliance were actually from Stormwind? Even Lang, who had watched Duque's rise step by step, felt a sense of happiness, as if a pie had fallen from the sky and smashed into his stomach just as he was about to starve to death. After a series of battles, not only were the citizens saved, but Stormwind's elite soldiers were also trained. Soldiers who had never experienced real battle, no matter how well they were trained, were still rookies who could easily die in battle. Looking at the 8 nations of the Alliance, none of them were as fortunate as Stormwind City. With the 50,000 elite soldiers that had been withdrawn from Stormwind City as the backbone, they had successfully trained a total of 120,000 power soldiers through 2 defensive battles. This was just a rough figure. In reality, according to Duque's guidance, there were disguised killings of prisoners of war in Stormwind's territory. It was also not entirely correct to accuse Stormwind of murdering the captives, as it was nominally a gladiatorial competition. However, it was usually 10 fully armed militiamen with 4 weeks of military training against 1 orc. The militia could kill the beastmen at will, but the beastmen were not allowed to kill the militia. The death of any militia would result in the beheading of 20 orc captives. Stormwind used this method to quickly and effectively train all the adult men. Although the Church of Holy Light had also complained about such behavior, the Rotterdam Kingdom also had gladiatorial arenas. Killing captives in such a way was really inexcusable. Moreover, among the hundreds of thousands of refugees in Stormwind, who did not have a blood feud with the orcs. If Stormwind was really desperate and did not hesitate to go all out, they could immediately summon 300,000 soldiers. Would the orcs be afraid of that? Of course, Lang would never send the last man in Stormwind to the battlefield unless it was absolutely necessary, because it would definitely be a nightmare for the grand plan to restore the country. Fortunately, King Lang had Duque. He was the most meticulous commander who would use the smallest price in exchange for the greatest results. Duque. Seeing Duque approach, Lang was the first to get off his horse and open his arms to welcome Duque. Duque was a little flattered. In his and everyone else's impression, only Anduin and Medivh, the king's childhood friends, could receive such treatment from Lang. Even Duke Bolvar, the heir of the Fordragon family who had been loyal to the royal family for 1,000 years, did not have such treatment. It was obvious that Duke Marcus would be an unshakable name in the core ministers of Stormwind from now on. Duque, you've worked hard. Lang's eyes were filled with undisguised tears. They were filled with pity, lament, and more than anything else, he was touched. Everyone knew that once the tribe was defeated, the one who would benefit the most would definitely be Stormwind. It would go from a perished country that existed only on paper to a powerful country that could shake the world. The people were still there, the army was strong, and the navy was strong. What it lacked was the rich land that it used to have. Finally, when Lang finished hugging, Duque broke free from the suffocating bear hug. No, it's all worth it for Stormwind. There's no need to be humble. We all know about your great achievements in the Earthy Highlands. General Seamus flattered Duque bluntly. 35,000 orc soldiers and 12,000 laborers were killed in battle, and 23,000 were seriously injured. You're really fierce in this battle. Duque was a little embarrassed as he rubbed the tip of his nose with his index finger. No, I didn't do anything. The key was that I found a record of Princess Misrel from an ancient book in Karazhan. Then I first broke her shackles, then defeated her, and then imprisoned her. Well, even I feel like I had nothing better to do. Duque spoke so casually about defeating the fierce attack of hundreds of thousands of orcs, but it made the people around him feel a sense of respect. Patting Duque on the shoulder, Lang got straight to the point. All right, I'll leave my 50,000 elites to you. You saved them in the past. Even if I have absolute confidence in you, but I'll say this first, every man in Stormwind will be one less man. I don't want you to lose them by accident. Duque assured him. Don't worry. I'll bring 50,000 people, and at least an additional 100,000 elites for the Alliance. Almost at the same time, in the hinterlands. They're my king. Cudrin Wildhammer, the king of the Wildhammer dwarves, a dwarf king with a beard that looked like orange flames. As the most famous griffin knight in the Wildhammer tribe, he had the best partner, and that was his griffin, Scarlet. A dwarf named Farland was pointing in the direction of his hand. Cudrin's sharp eyes caught something. He kicked Scarlet with his heel. His griffin let out a soft neigh in response, tightened its wings, and began to dive down. Soon, he could vaguely see a large group of things passing through the forest below. Trolls? No, definitely not. Ever since the War of the Three Hammers 230 years ago, the Wildhammer dwarves left Cosmoden and went north to the hinterlands to rest and recuperate in the Eagle's Nest Mountain. They had many conflicts with the trolls here. The Wildhammer dwarves could recognize the trolls even if they were ashes. Chapter 342. Although the creatures below had green skin similar to the disgusting forest trolls, they walked on the ground instead of flying over the branches. As creatures that understood the forest as well as the elves, their footsteps were too heavy and careless. It should be said that they never thought of covering their tracks. When they passed through an empty field, Cudrin saw those creatures clearly. They were taller and more muscular than humans. They had thick muscles and long legs that were as heavy as elephants. They were either carrying heavy weapons like axes and hammers on their backs. No matter what these creatures were, they were preparing for war. To hell with green-skinned monsters. They're so ugly. Cudrin pulled the reins backwards, causing the griffin's head to tilt backwards. It was a signal for the griffin to ascend. Scarlet swung its long golden tail, spread its huge wings, and flapped them a few times, stirring up a large gust of wind as it once again ascended into the sky. There, Flander and the other griffin knights were circling, waiting for their king. Cudrin rode on Scarlet and joined the flying formation. Go back! Cudrin called out, and the entire squad of griffin knights began to fly at high speed. The wind howled in their ears, and everything in their field of vision was flying backwards at high speed. The strong wind blew his well-combed beard and hair to the side, pulling at his chin. Flying day after day also made his skin rough and full of the smell of weathering. Even so, he and his subordinates were still immersed in the pleasure of flying without gravity, unable to extricate themselves. Fly. This was even more exciting than the 3 consecutive hairpin turns on Mount Akina. After a high-speed flight, a huge stone sculpture in the shape of an eagle was overlooking the land of the hinterlands from west to east in a domineering manner. That was the home of him and all the Wildhammer dwarves, Eagle's Nest Mountain. Ever since the terrible War of the Three Hammers, the dwarves split up. Although they did not have any deep conflicts with their bronze-beard brothers, they still chose to refuse to live under someone else's roof. They crossed the huge strait, crossed the Arthi Highlands, and arrived at Eagle's Nest Mountain. Here, they became good friends with the griffin tribe that lived here. Soaring in the sky with their griffin friends always brought them pride and joy. It was a pity that this flight did not bring Kudrin any good mood. The great demons attacked, bringing with them a large group of despicable and crude, unfamiliar humanoids. Everyone gather, unless you want to see those ugly green-skinned creatures stroll through our land, holding a bonfire party on our land with the corpses of our people. Kudrin roared with his thunderous voice. Not long after, the entire Eagle Nest Mountain was roused. Get ready to fight, lads. We're going to let those green-skinned monsters know that they're not welcome in the hinterlands. Kudrin waved his warhammer. Half a day later, Stormwind's army that was advancing in the northeast of the Hillsbrad Hills received the news. After the handover, King Lang returned to South Shore and guarded it with Bolvar. The commander of this army was naturally Duque. Are you sure that they've formed an alliance and are not just passing by? Servanas asked an Elven Ranger nervously. With only one combat team left, the Elven Rangers were no longer enough to form a fighting force, so they were all sent to scout by Queen Sylvanas. The scouts' report made Servanas very worried. If the great demons and orcs had really become allies, it would further confirm Duque's speculation. Even if Duque had sent Aurelia and the elites of the Windrunner family back, it would still cause a lot of trouble. The ranger replied angrily, "I'm absolutely sure. I heard their conversation. Those damn great demons and orcs were communicating in broken human language. In order to make each other understand, they roared every word. It's obvious that they've reached some kind of alliance." The Elven Ranger showed a strong sense of anxiety, which was exactly the same as Queen Sylvanas's. They're preparing to attack the Eagle Nest Mountain and then go to Cuel Salis. Cuel Salis was the home of the High Elves. Just like how the people of Stormwind hated the orcs who had killed countless of their people, the elves and trolls hated each other. Over the millennia, too much blood had been shed in the fight for the forest. Their hatred had already melted into the blood-stained soil of the forest, so thick that it could not be dissolved. If the trolls joined the horde, it was obvious that in order to thank their new ally, the horde's spear would be pointed directly at Cuel Salis. Servanas turned to look at Duque. The playful, competitive, and indifferent aura that wrapped around her had long disappeared without a trace. All of her aura had formed a clear domain, as if even the clock that ushered in the long-cherished wish of killing the great demons had been frozen by her fighting spirit. Servanas' ability to change her aura at any time and place made Duque involuntarily sigh with emotion. Yes, Queen Sylvanas had the liveliness of a windrunner, but also the coldness of a general. This kind of superwoman who could perfectly merge two different auras into one. He really did not know who could subdue her. In Duque's memory, there was no memory of Servanas, who had become the Forgotten Queen, having any entanglements with anyone until very late in the game. And as time went on, Queen Sylvanas became more and more extreme. Let's not think about that for now. What really changed the situation of the Alliance was the Third War at the Dark Portal. Duque shook his head, dispelling those thoughts that did not fit the current situation from his mind. The situation has changed a lot. Since the trolls are likely to join the horde, we need to quickly inform the Wildhammer dwarves not to fight the horde first. Duque turned to look at Windsor. "Reginald, bring that thing with the rest of the army and come here as soon as possible." Windsor nodded. Duque then looked at Tom Seamus. "To speed up the march? I understand." Duque blinked. "I need you to enter the battlefield at the right time. I will let Elugia inform you of the specifics through magic." Tom and Elugia nodded. Finally, Duque looked back at the anxious Servanas. "Since you are in such a hurry, why don't you fly with me?" Servanas looked at the griffin rider leading two majestic griffins. After a long while, she finally said, "I don't know any riding skills." Duque's eyes widened. Chapter 343. More than once, Duque had found that this Azeroth was a bit off. A deviation of 21% wasn't high, but it wasn't low either. At least it was more than 1/5. Duque really didn't know whether Sylvanas knew how to ride or not. He only vaguely remembered that both the High Elves and the Blood Elves of later generations liked to ride a chocobo that looked a bit like an ostrich. Back in the game, he had killed a certain tragic prince countless times for a white chocobo. He had almost pulled out the prince's last pair of underwear before he managed to kill it. An ordinary man was not guilty, but Kale, that's with 2 mounts, being a rich man was a sin. Well, in this life, Duque and Kale, that's didn't have any deep grudges. No matter what, Queen Sylvanas was clearly saying that even if she didn't know how to ride a griffin, she still had to take him. When it came to the safety of her homeland, she had long since entered a state where she wouldn't listen no matter what. Instead, Gavin Rad raised his hand and said, "I don't know how to ride a griffin, so I won't go." Duque looked around and realized that if 2 people and a griffin were to ride, Sylvanas would have to rely on him. Okay. The captain of the Griffin Knights secretly rolled his eyes and couldn't help but praise a certain deputy commander in his heart. It was an unwritten rule that women were forbidden in the army. But there was no rule that said women couldn't go to the battlefield, right? Although the 2 blonde elven rangers had been hovering around Duque all day, they could fight better than any man. In terms of kills alone, they could beat any man by 9 streets. The Silverhand Knights had made a name for themselves in the Silverpine Forest. Wuther, who was the best at fighting, only had a kill count in the triple digits. What about Aurelia and Sylvanas? The former had 1,388 kills, while the latter had 2,172. Moreover, if Aurelia hadn't left midway, it would have been most likely Aurelia, who had been in the lead, who kept the kill record. In 4th place was still the Windrunner, which was the 4th sister, Lilith, with 812 kills. It wasn't wrong to say that the Windrunner sisters were a force to be reckoned with. Of course, the most insane orc killer in the Alliance was none other than Duque. Even though Duque had very humbly pushed out the merits of trapping and killing the horde to the other warriors, most of the merits were still given to Duque for this battle at the Strait and using Mizril, the princess of the earth, to trap and kill tens of thousands of orcs. On official records, Duque's kill count was 61,820. It had to be known that Duque wasn't just killing people. On his kill list, there were also powerhouses like the Beastman Fire clan's Patriarch Dal Triple Bloodblade, the Storm Marauder clan's number 2 Warlock Rakama, who was second only to Ghoul Den. In the eyes of the Alliance's soldiers, Duque was definitely a true powerhouse. So, when they saw Sylvanas get on the griffin from the back and sit behind Duque, the knights all smiled. As long as Sir Duque can lead us to victory in this damn war, I don't care how many women he has. The playful looks from the people around almost made Queen Sylvanas furious. Before Queen Sylvanas could get on the griffin, Duque's waist was immediately attacked. Damn it. Well, no matter how good of a temper Duque was, he would still be angry after being attacked for no reason. If we enter the battle, you will have to hug me tightly, and I will, according to what you said, I will be taken advantage of by you. While I still have time, I will take revenge first, Sylvanas said with confidence. Also, we must stop the horde before they turn to quell thus. Otherwise, I will twist your head off. Sylvanas confidently spoke about unreasonable things. Duque felt wronged. He had once told Aurelia what it meant to take advantage of a horde, and Sylvanas learned it. He even used it on the spot. But this was already in advance. A man and a woman riding on a griffin, hugging each other's waist and holding each other's hands, was it not normal? Is there a need to take revenge on me? And it's in advance? Of course, what Duque couldn't stand the most was that Queen Sylvanas actually wanted his people to fight to the death here to stop the horde. What a joke! How could the elites of Orgrim be so easy to deal with? And in the forest where the combat power of the trolls and orcs was infinitely amplified? Moreover, if they dealt with the horde here, how could they drag the Wildhammer dwarves and high elves into the battle? Queen Sylvanas was too arrogant. She couldn't let this evil trend grow. At this thought, Duque pinched Queen Sylvanas' thigh hard. What are you doing? You still don't understand? Revenge. I haven't even done anything wrong and I'm already being punished. Is this reasonable? Do I think that your Prince Kale, that will definitely fall into evil ways in the future, so I should stab him to death now? Servanas was speechless. Duque thought maliciously, if this works and I don't have to take responsibility, Duque, will first deal with that idiot Kale, and that idiot Arthes first. Duque thought again, if Queen Sylvanas pissed on my head now, will I have a good life in the future? I have to give this woman a strong dose of medicine. I have such foresight, but I didn't become a prophet. Instead, you're a charlatan? Bullsh *T. I did my best to think for you elves and the Alliance. Now I'm being punished. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it anymore. All troops, listen up. No one is to go to the hinterlands until things are clear. Anyway, the Wildhammer dwarves and high elves didn't join the Alliance. If they all die, it has nothing to do with me, the Alliance's deputy commander. We'll wait for the orcs to kill them all, then we'll deal with the orcs. Their heroic deputy commander was furious. In fact, he was a little unhappy with the high elves' stinginess and arrogance. All the Alliance soldiers around him suddenly became indignant. They stared at Servanas and the few elven rangers with sharp eyes. As if a bucket of cold water had been poured on winter, Servanas finally realized the problem. Although the high elves and the Alliance had a close relationship up until now, in fact, whether it was the humans or the dwarves, did they not resent the high elves who refused to participate in the war? The story of how arrogant the Silver Moon Council's representative was at the Lordaeron Conference had long spread throughout the Alliance. Yes, the elites of the Windrunner family had indeed killed a lot of orcs, but compared to the entire battle, a mere few thousand people was simply a drop in the bucket. For this war of races, the bronze-bearded dwarves had died hundreds of thousands, and the human countries had sacrificed millions. However, the high elves had almost no sacrifices. When the humans and the orcs were at war, the elves were indifferent. Well, now that Kuel Salis was in danger of being attacked, why did the elves need the humans to send troops to help? Even if it was to rope in the Wildhammer dwarves who had a closer relationship with the Alliance had no good reason to save Kuel Salis. The problem was, without the help of humans, Kuel Salis would definitely not be able to hold on. This had been proven by history. Chapter 344. The High Elves were indeed powerful, with a lot of pharaoh and powerful rangers. It sounded perfect, didn't it? But didn't everyone feel that something was missing? Yes, it was the soldiers at the front. The slender bodies of the High Elves meant that they were good mages and rangers, but not good warriors. Their natural arm strength and stamina were different from other races, and they were at a disadvantage in hand-to-hand combat against the tall trolls, not to mention the violent orcs. It wasn't just a matter of racial talent. More importantly, the High Elves were too small in population. Their long lifespans meant that the High Elves weren't keen on reproduction. And in a country where mages were the most respected, the status of warriors was extremely low. This caused the High Elves to have even fewer warriors. It was also because of this that Kuel Salis vigorously developed the arcane puppet technology, attempting to use it to make up for the lack of vanguards in the war. Without the defensive barrier of the forest, Kuel Salis would probably repeat the same mistake, being beaten like a dog by the trolls 2,800 years ago, and almost being destroyed. This time, with the even more violent orcs, the High Elves definitely wouldn't be able to win. Seeing Duque, who had been saving the world like a saint a moment ago, turn into a scoundrel in an instant, Sylvanas was about to go crazy. Duque and her sister were indeed very, very good friends. But in the face of a world-class event, Duque had nothing to say about putting the Alliance first. How could she know that there was a reason why Duque helped or saved every kingdom? Needless to say, the Furnace Castle was the core of the Alliance in the future. The Kingdom of the Sea, called Tiras, was the key to restoring Stormwind. Alterac South Shore. All the Stormwind refugees were there now. Songar. Duque clearly remembered how tragic the torrential castle would be after the Third War. Duque had sown the seed today, and he would definitely reap the fruit in the future. Perhaps Duque was indeed a great hero of the Alliance today, But when it came to saving the world, Duque definitely wouldn't mind helping himself. Only he knew that in the future, it would be a world where dozens of meters tall demons roamed the streets. If he didn't preserve more vitality today, he would have to pay a higher price and compromise in the future. He had to assert his authority. No, I have nothing to do with Queen Sylvia. I just want to establish a master-servant relationship. Seeing Duque looking at himself with a deep gaze, Servanas was at a loss for what to do. It wasn't that she didn't have talent in this area. It was just that her older sister was more mature and steady. She didn't need to think about this at all. She just needed to be a ranger general and be a paycheck thief in Silver Moon City. All of a sudden, she was asked to give a plan, or a suitable identity and reason for Duke to lead the army to save Quell, the Lus. She really couldn't say anything. After discovering that Duque wasn't threatened by her at all, she bit her lip and stared at Duque without saying a word. 1 second, within 5 seconds, 30 seconds, the air seemed to have frozen, and time seemed to have stopped. Finally, a pleading look appeared in Servanas' eyes. Duque didn't want to push Servanas too much at once, so he sighed in the end. Servanas, it's not that I'm threatening you on purpose, or that I don't want to send troops. Faced with the barbaric invasion of the tribes, the 8 countries signed the Lordaeron Alliance Treaty. It's reasonable for me to lead the army into any of the 8 countries, but not Quell Salis. However, Lus was different. Once the army of the Alliance stepped into Quell, the Lus without the official permission of the Sun King, it would be equivalent to declaring war on the High Elves. I can't bear this responsibility, neither can Lothar. No king or kings can bear this responsibility. Then what do you think we should do? Servanas' heart sank when she heard this. She wasn't young anymore. As a ranger general, she knew very well how the old bastards of the Silver Moon Council were. In times of peace, this might be a manifestation of democracy. But in times of war, these guys could do nothing but hold the army back. Even if it was her sister who went back, she would have to ask King Anastrian and the Silver Moon Council for help. That was easier said than done. Even after 2,000 years, there were still counselors who complained that they had given the humans too many benefits. This made Anastrian, who succeeded the throne after the Troll War, rather embarrassed. After all, even if he wasn't the one who set the terms, it was the Sunstrider royal family's fault. Duque let out another long sigh. So the crux of the problem isn't with our alliance, but with the High Elves themselves. Then, there's nothing we can do? For the sake of my sister and the Windrunner family's friendship with you. Servanas' body was trembling. For the sake of friendship, you can come up first. Duque reached out his right hand to Servanas. When I deduced that the Horde might attack the hinterland's Eagle Nest Mountain, I wrote a letter to Magni Bronzebeard. Because his father is heavily injured and can't do anything, Magni, as the acting king of the Bronzebeard dwarves, asked me to save their Wildhammer dwarves if the Eagle Nest Mountain is attacked. So, it's absolutely reasonable for us to go to the Eagle Nest Mountain. And then, if we can successfully protect the Wildhammer dwarves, we will pursue the Orc and Troll alliance all the way to the border of Quell Salis. But let me say this first. If Quell Salis doesn't officially join the alliance's soldiers will never step into the High Elves' territory. Duque emphasized the word alliance. You've already thought this through, haven't you? Servanas said angrily, but she put her hand on Duque's palm. Queen Sylvanas' hand is so soft. What the hell, why don't these rangers even have calluses on their hands when they use their bows all day? The High Elves' bodies are really unscientific. Queen Sylvanas didn't give Duque any more chances to be distracted. With a nimble flip, she sat on the back of the griffin behind Duque. Originally, Duque had fantasized about whether Queen Sylvanas would stick to his back. Unfortunately, Queen Sylvanas, who had just embarrassed Duque, was very defensive. No matter how the griffin twisted its back, or how the griffin shook its wings, Queen Sylvanas held onto the griffin's back, keeping her chest at a distance from Duque. At most, she held onto Duque's belt with both hands. Unfortunately, an hour later, Queen Sylvanas' efforts to prevent herself from being taken advantage of were destined to go up in smoke. That was because there was a battle ahead. Countless griffins circled in the sky. On the ground, pitch-black spears shot into the sky, shooting dwarves and griffins down from time to time. Servanas clenched her teeth, pressed down on Duque's shoulder, and flipped in front of Duque. "Hold onto my waist tightly." Chapter 345. In the name of our ancestors, there are too many of them. They're just like marching ants, but bigger and better equipped. Kudrin cursed as he looked at the scene below. He and an entire hunting group were hovering in the air. The advantage of obtaining air supremacy was that they could adjust their altitude at will so that they could have a good view of the unfamiliar green skin monsters. But the situation in front of him was terrible. When his sentinels first discovered these strange and ugly creatures and went to inform Kudrin, they estimated that they would still need at least 3 days to reach their destination. Unfortunately, these guys were moving very fast, and now they were only less than half a day away from the dwarven territories below the Eagle Nest Mountain. At first, Kudrin only saw a small group, but then he noticed that there were at least 3 groups less than 50 meters away. These green skin monsters were scattered into groups of about 20 people, but it was conceivable that more groups were coming out from the depths of the forest. After flying for about a kilometer, Kudrin actually found more than 40 groups of green skin monsters. The Wildhammer dwarves were never afraid of any challenge, but if these guys were not just for show, they would have been able to destroy Eagle Nest Mountain with their absolute advantage in numbers. For some reason, Kudrin suddenly missed his bronze-bearded cousin. Among the 3 dwarves, Bronze-bearded was undoubtedly the strongest in close combat. The steel line of defense that they formed should be able to stop those huge ugly green-skinned monsters. Unfortunately, there was no matter what, Kudrin and the others could not sit still and watch their home be destroyed. Kudrin looked around and raised the Tempest Hammer in his hand. Wildhammer dwarves, attack. He blew the horn. The dwarves raised their warhammers high. The griffins responded with a loud cry, spread their wings, and swooped down excitedly. More than 10 yellow lightning bolts struck down from almost vertical angles. Of course, their target was not the green skin monsters themselves. Letting the huge griffins rush into the dense forest was truly courting death. They let the griffins fly over the top of the canopy, then threw the Tempest Hammer in their hands at the tree trunk, letting the hammer hit the tree trunk fiercely. Don't think that the griffin riders abandoned their weapons just like that. Galestorm's hammer was not a simple hammer made of metal. This hammer, which was completely condensed from the power of lightning, had long since entered the realm of mystery. Even though he had deliberately weakened the lightning contained in the hammer, the powerful impact still caused leaves, berries, and needles to fall like rain. The green skin monsters were at a loss for what to do. Fine leaves were fine, but nuts were a different story. The giant nuts in the forest near Eagle Nest Mountain were bigger than a human head when they matured, weighing almost 5 kilograms. What does it feel like to be hit in the head by a 5-kilogram freefall object after falling for more than 10 meters? Pa! An unlucky guy's head was smashed by a nut. Greenskin didn't know how all of this happened. Since the forest was no longer safe, it was time to leave. They jogged to the nearest clearing. This was the opportunity the Wildhammer dwarves had been waiting for. The Grim Reaper, who had been hovering in the air for a long time, began to attack for real. Go to hell, green skin. Letting out a loud battle cry, Kudrin Wildhammer took the initiative to attack. The Tempest Hammer, that was flashing with dazzling lightning bolts, smashed out with a series of whistling sounds. The first greenskin's reaction could not be said to be slow. He raised the huge battle axe in his hand and blocked in front of him. Unfortunately, what attacked him was not a real object. With a burst of thunder, the hammer made of lightning passed through his axe, causing him to feel numb from the electric shock. At the same time, it firmly smashed into his jaw. From his chin that had become as soft as rubber, it could be seen that all the bones in that area had been smashed into pieces, and his body suddenly flew backward. Green skin bastards are not worthy to defile our forest. Kudrin's roar greatly boosted the morale of the Wildhammer dwarves. Almost at the same time that the orc was sent flying, the Tempest Hammer flew back into Kudrin's hand and disappeared again. This time, It smashed open the head of another green skin. The Griffin King's scare drew an S-shaped arc in the air, beautifully avoiding the weapons thrown by two green skins, and at the same time, swiped its claws and opened the chest of one of them. Scare flapped its huge wings and circled in the air without slowing down, and immediately launched a second round of attacks. If they were caught off guard just now all of them had raised their weapons and were ready. However, it was useless. For the Tempest Hammer, that could not be blocked and could only be dodged, this method of gradually gathering together was a form of seeking death. The Tempest Hammer, its essence was lightning, and its power varied from person to person. It had a very important characteristic, which was the splash effect. If the person who was hit was too close to the others, they would definitely be affected by the aftershock of the lightning. Just like this time, Kudrin pulled the Tempest Hammer behind him and threw it out like a javelin. The heavy hammerhead first smashed into the right corner of a green skin's eyebrow. In the next moment, his head exploded with the sound of a large-caliber dwarven musket. When this guy laid on the ground like a corpse, the lightning sparks that splashed from his body caused the other two who tried to dodge to feel their hands and feet go numb from the electricity. This gave the two griffin dwarves behind Kudrin a chance to dive down. Other than throwing the Tempest Hammer, 3 huge griffins in a row showed their might at the same time, especially Scare. This was especially true for Scarlet. Her powerful front claws directly used high speed to rip a green skin's head and Scarlet's spine out of his body. She used her sharp beak to tear the head of the second green skin, and at the same time, she used her wings to stun the third one. The Griffin Knights were like harvesting crops in the field, easily plowing a bloody path through the green skin's formation. Unfortunately, the ferocity of the Griffins only ended here. Suddenly, a large amount of spears shot out from the forest. It was comparable to a human archer's range, but it had a terrifying penetrative power that surpassed it. In that instant, Kudrin's heart felt like it was being cut by a knife, because he heard at least 20 griffins wailing and dozens of dwarf knights screaming in pain. Almost at the same time, Kudrin heard his adjutant Amhar's heart-wrenching scream. "Troll!" Following his adjutant's shout, Kudrin saw with his own eyes a stone axe that wasn't too sharp spinning at high speed in the air, drawing a sinister arc in the air and smashing into the shoulder of another griffin knight in his squad, Beflin. Beflan's left arm immediately became powerless and fluttered in the wind, and a wound near his shoulder spurted out dark red blood along with the wind. Chapter 346. The 7th Squad is under attack. Morar and Seagrove are dead. Hell, Arpin and Ratton got shot out of their griffins. Oh my god, the greenskins are slaughtering them. Extremely unfavorable news was coming from all directions. The hunters had become the prey. The enemy had obviously planned this beforehand. They had successfully used the greenskins as bait to attract the Wildhammer Griffin Knight's attention, temporarily crippling the Wildhammer Dwarf's strongest fighting force. In the next moment, Kudrin saw the greenskins rushing out from every corner of the forest. They had almost covered the entire mountain, and he finally realized the seriousness of the matter. "Damn it," Kudrin roared, "they've joined forces with the trolls, greenskins against greenskins." Amhar's adjutant shouted in a shrill voice, "What do we do? There are too many of them. They have at least 30,000 warriors. Eagle Nest Mountain cannot withstand this level of attack. We'll be finished in a week at most." A week? Looking at the green dwarfs who fearlessly fought against the griffins on the ground, looking at the green dwarfs who charged forward with their hammers even if there was only one of them left, Kudrin, the king of brute hammers, finally had a clear understanding. We have to find help and we have to be quick. Otherwise, the greenskins will soon swarm over and tear the eagle's head off Eagle Nest Mountain. As soon as Kudrin finished speaking, he saw a squad of griffin knights that he had never seen before barging into the air. They were definitely not the Wildhammer Dwarves' griffins. The Wildhammer Dwarves regarded griffins as their friends, and would not put anything on them other than the saddle necessary for riding. But the griffins that flew over not only had taller humanoid figures on them, but also a series of small flags with insignias were tied to the reins on the griffins' necks. Human griffins? The way the Wildhammer dwarves used griffins was worlds apart from the way humans used them. Humans had never found an effective long-range attack at high speed and under the strong winds. That was because both bows and crossbow bolts were terrible. Humans had even tried to let the Griffin Knights wear an 8-meter-long lance. For example, the Kingdom of Lordaeron had done such a stupid thing at some point in time. The lance would be finished in one shot, and to hit the target, the Griffins had to land or fly at an extremely low altitude. Fortunately, Kudrin saw that these human Griffin Knights were equipped with javelins. It might be useful, the Brute Hammer King commented irresponsibly. The humans clearly meant no harm. They waved their hands to show that they were not prepared to throw any long-range weapons. Looking at the deplorable situation below him, Kudrin ordered his men to fly up into the sky while he approached to see why the human Griffin Knights would come to this godforsaken hinterlands. Kudrin immediately saw the leader, no, the pair. A female elf ranger sat in front, while a human mage held her waist and held the griffin's reins to control it. Oh my god, there's a war here, it's not a good place for an outing. If you're here to flirt, please leave the airspace of Eagle Nest Mountain as soon as possible. Kudrin's loud voice made the human knights burst into laughter. It was obvious that the blonde elven ranger was bristling like a cat. Damn it, Duque, you better explain to that pighead, or else I won't let you off. The female elf did not reply and used her slender legs to clamp the griffin's neck, straightened her body, and shot an arrow. It was not a normal shot. It was the kind where 3 arrows were held between the index, middle, ring, and pinky fingers at the same time. One had to know that every time an arrow was shot, the difficulty would increase by 1-fold. Triple shot was already 4 times the difficulty of normal archery. Mounted archery had to be doubled. Mounted archery had to be doubled when riding a griffin that was flying at high speed. Not to mention that they were at least 200 meters above the ground. They could not even see the target clearly. In terms of difficulty, this was already in the category of long-range shooting, and the difficulty was doubled. This kind of shooting with 32 times the difficulty, could it be done by a human? Kudrin was the first to not believe it. Please, stop fooling around. We're at war. It's because we're here to help you fight the orcs that the 2 strongest people on the Alliance's God Killer list came to help. Orcs? Are you talking about those burly green-skinned creatures that I've never seen before? It's quite an appropriate name. But what was the god-slaying list? Just as he was about to retort, Kudrin suddenly saw the arrow shot by the female elf had arrived. It was a flying arrow that was completely beyond imagination. The light green arrow flew out with the wind, and at first, it did not feel like it was shooting at all. After a few short seconds, Kudrin was shocked to find that the arrows were speeding up with the wind. Faster and faster, and sharper. If the speed at the beginning was crawling, then in the end, it was simply flying. Every dwarf knight around Kudrin saw that among the group of beastmen that did not have any dwarf griffin knights nearby, 3 of them were suddenly hit by something and abruptly fell to the ground, a touch of bright red spreading from their throats. In just 5 seconds, the female elf had already completed 5 consecutive shots. The team of orcs below were all dead. Kudrin was stunned, and he did not even feel the strong wind when he was flying. Alright, I've seen the first god of slaughter. Where is the second god of slaughter? In the next moment, hundreds of hands made of arcane energy suddenly appeared in the air, and 100 blue, white, and red magic bullets shot into the forest. In less than 3 seconds, a series of screams came from below at the same time. Clearly, more than 100 beastmen were finished. Greetings, my dear Kudrin Wildhammer. I solemnly introduce myself to you. I'm Duke Marcus, the Vice Commander of the Lordaeron Alliance and the #1 Orc Killer list, entrusted by your distant cousin, Magni Bronzebeard, to come to your aid. Kudrin and the other Wildhammer dwarves were scared out of their wits. They had seen bunkers, but they had never seen such a bunker. If the female elf's archery was considered a godly skill within the realm of imagination, then what this wizard named Duque did was completely beyond the concept of humans. Instant cast, multiple cast, high-speed cast, any one of these skills could be called a master, and to be able to do it on the battlefield at the same time, it was simply inhuman. Even if Kudrin did not want to admit it, Magni had indeed found him a good helper. But this small number of people was not enough. There were at least tens of thousands of green dwarves below. No matter how strong this couple was, how many could they kill? I have to admit that you picked a very good time to come here. Tell me, what do the Wildhammer dwarves want? I'm sorry to tell you, but the goal of those orcs is to conquer all intelligent races in the world of Azeroth. So, for the future of the Wildhammer dwarves, I formally invite you to join the Alliance. Chapter 347. At this moment, thousands of possibilities flashed through Kudrin's mind. For a moment, Kudrin was almost certain that this was a conspiracy. The timing was too coincidental. The Eagle Nest Mountain was attacked, and you came. I didn't even ask for help. Duque's speed was faster than those death merchants who came to resell arms when they smelled the scent of war. The next second, Kudrin smiled bitterly. The Wildhammer dwarves knew that the entire Lordaeron continent was in a mess. The Wildhammer dwarves were not a completely isolated race. Even the merchants who frequented the Eagle Nest Mountain had told the Wildhammer dwarves that the entire continent was at war. From the Silverpine Forest in the west to the Hillsbrad Hills in the middle, and then to the Earthy Highlands in the east. However, the Wildhammer dwarves had always been aloof from worldly affairs, which made them subconsciously reject the news that war was approaching. In fact, just 2 weeks ago he had received a long letter from Magni Bronzebeard. The letter detailed the orcs' unreasonable territorial claims and the most barbaric acts of genocide. All resistance was executed. Even if they surrendered, the dwarven slaves who were too troublesome or could not afford to keep them were executed. Supervisors were executed when they were in a bad mood. These barbaric greenskin creatures did not care about the lives of people outside of their own race. Or rather, they did not even care about the lives of their own people. Unfortunately, this was not a good feeling. On one side, there were bandits who aggressively invaded his garden, and on the other side, there was a treaty that was almost like an alliance. Duque saw Kudrin's embarrassment. No, great Wildhammer King. We are not the only ones here. At the request of Magni Bronzebeard, one of the leaders of the Alliance, 50,000 elite soldiers of the Alliance have been arrayed on the border of the hinterlands. As long as you allow it, the warriors of the Alliance will definitely defeat these invaders for the Wildhammer tribe. Don't worry, there are no additional conditions. Dwarves were people who could be persuaded by reason but not by force. Coercion and bribery would only make them give you a gun, and they would rather fight to the death with the orcs than beg for mercy. Duque's method of inducing people to join the Alliance made the Wildhammer dwarves much more comfortable. All right, in the name of the Wildhammer King, I accept the goodwill of the Alliance. As long as what my relative said is true, the Wildhammer dwarves will join your alliance. Duke smiled and immediately sent a magic message. Elucia, let General Seamus advance at top speed. The Stormwind elites who were already prepared for a rapid march abandoned all food and military supplies, and only brought their weapons and equipment with them as they trotted into the hinterlands. In the sky, Duke hugged Sylvanas's slender waist as Queen Sylvanas rained arrows down on the horde that was running on the ground. At the same time, Duke used the System Elf scanning ability to mark out the trolls hiding in the forest and quickly killed them with magic. Yet there were too many of her. The tribes that covered the mountains and plains swarmed towards Eagle Nest Mountain without any formation. Under Wildhammer of the Horde, the tribes. Under the command of General Seamus, the well-trained elite soldiers of the Stormwind Kingdom moved slowly. Under the command of General Seamus, the well-trained Stormwind elites moved slowly. Only after the tribe had been baptized by the javelins thrown out from behind the shield wall would they be qualified to face the terrifying shield wall. Only after the horde was hit by the spears thrown from behind the shield wall would they have the right to face this terrifying shield wall. Behind the 2 rows of sword and shield soldiers were 3 rows of pikemen. They repeatedly thrust and retracted their pikes, ensuring that any orc would have to face more than 6 pikes at the same time. This was definitely beyond the limits of the orcs' martial arts. The orcs slammed into the shield wall. Some parts of the shield wall had collapsed. The defenders there were unable to completely block the orcs' charge. The rain of spears gave the warriors time to repair their formation. They quickly stepped over their fallen comrades and filled the gaps in the formation. The trolls on the other side also threw spears. These primitive and crude stone spears did cause a lot of trouble for the humans. At least, the penetration of these spears was limited. They could not compare to the penetration of metal spears. When Seamus ordered the warriors to increase the number of warriors to 3, the formation was finally stabilized. The waves of orcs crashed into the shield wall. Less of it was destroyed. In contrast, the hordes suffered a greater blow. When the third wave of horde arrived, the FFF flamethrower team arrived and taught the horde a lesson. Originally, General Seamus was already prepared to fight a fierce battle. However, after the first wave of attacks, he was shocked to find that the people rushing out of the forest with weapons in their hands were actually the tribe's laborers. Even though these laborers had decent fighting spirit, how could their fighting strength compare to a standard orc warriors? Not to mention the elites of the Blackrock tribe. Their height, strength, and speed were all reduced. This made the battle more like a civil war between two human kingdoms. When the sun set, there were 40,000 orc corpses on the battlefield at the foot of Eagle's Nest Mountain. A glorious victory! On the battlefield, the dwarven warriors who were fighting on the front line all let out excited cheers. Their new allies, the human warriors, smiled faintly. They did not seem very excited. What? Humans don't even celebrate a victory now? A dwarf warrior asked. Believe me, as long as it's a human warrior wearing the griffin emblem, every single one of them has killed 2 digits of orcs. We've definitely seen more orcs than you have. But the orc laborers that came today cannot make us excited. An elite warrior of the Griffin Legion replied. 2 hours later, Kudrin Wildhammer received Duque and his party in the throne room of Eagle's Nest Mountain. He had thought that the leaders of the humans were mostly old-fashioned old men. Obviously, his preconceived notions were wrong. Apart from a human general in his 40s or 50s, everyone present looked too young. Duke Marcus, a young man with a clean-shaven chin and a pair of deep black eyes, wore a blue and white mage robe. He was their commander. Then there was a fellow who gave off a gentle golden glow and called himself a holy knight. Finally, there was an elf girl with a wild and rebellious temperament. Although Kudrin didn't think she was cute, her valiant and beautiful appearance still won Kudrin's favor. It was rare for Kudrin to see so many special people. He was especially happy when Duque brought over a dozen barrels of wine. Now, he was very happy to get to know these people. Dwarves were only brothers with men who could drink. Kudrin made up his mind. Regardless of whether Duque was weak or not, those who could drink were brothers. Chapter 348. Welcome, welcome, boys and girls. He gestured for them to sit on the arranged chairs. You are very welcome. We were very worried that the greenskins would destroy our homeland. Ancestors above, even if they were laborers with low combat power, there were still too many of them. Fortunately, your arrival put an end to everything. We, the Wildhammer dwarves, are very grateful. Hello, please allow me to formally introduce myself. I am Duke Marcus, the current vice commander of the Alliance and the highest commander of this army. Duque patiently explained about the tribe, everything the orcs had done, and talked about the fate of Stormwind City. Finally, Duque decisively used the moral integrity of a Mediv. At this moment, Duque's body was covered in a holy radiance. It was a kind of affinity that was easily recognized. Kudrin, will you and your tribesmen join our alliance? Kudrin frowned and pulled at his beard. He once again took out the letter that Magni gave him. The content that he had always felt was unreliable jumped out of the paper, mixed with Duque's explanation, and entered his imagination. Just like today, a green tide flooded Cosmodon. The crude greenskins took control of the mines and plundered all the iron ores there. The huge black iron warships carried the cannons of Kratira's fleet and proudly crossed the sea. The green calamity engulfed the entire continent. After all the information and what they saw with their own eyes, the truth of the matter made Kudrin and the other Wildhammer dwarfs tremble. Indeed. Kudrin let out a long sigh. We, the Wildhammers, had a lot of conflicts with the Bronzebeard tribe. That was the reason for the terrible War of the Three Hammers. This is also why we left Cosmoden. But they are still our brothers, our tribesmen. When Kudrin said this, Duque already felt that there was hope. These dirty greenskins, this damned tribe, first attacked our brothers and plundered their land and the ores that have been passed down for thousands of years. Yes, ores are the dwarves' wealth and lives. Now they came to attack us. It was all thanks to your timely reinforcements that we were able to escape the fate of having our home destroyed. At this point, Kudrin suddenly changed the topic. That's right, I don't really like the timing of your support. But Duque raised his eyebrows. But the threat these filthy creatures pose to the entire world is real, and you have indeed saved Eagle Nest Mountain. Kudrin slammed his hand on the armrest of his chair. Of course, we will join the alliance. We must work together to annihilate these orcs until they become pitiful creatures that can no longer pose a threat to anyone. He stood up and extended his hand to Duque. Without a doubt, you will receive Wildhammer's assistance. Duque reached out his hand and quickly bared his teeth. Damn it, this Kudrin is so petty. Why did he use so much strength? His hand was almost crushed. Kudrin suddenly laughed evilly, but the dwarves hate hypocrisy the most. There will definitely be Wildhammer's assistance, but how much more will depend on your ability? A certain Wildhammer king crooked his finger, and a group of short dwarves carried the wine that Duke had delivered and ran up to him, huffing and puffing. 10 barrels of wine were lined up in a row. Kudrin slapped one of the barrels. Come, don't play tricks. King against king, general against general. Every time we drink a glass, if you are drunk by me, I will give half of the Griffin Knights. If you have the ability to let me go, I will bring all the Griffin Knights with me. Of course, you have the right to refuse. At the end of the sentence, it was completely a threat. A pain-in-the-ass threat. Duque subconsciously glanced at the corner of his eyes. At this moment, the Stormwind General Star was shining brightly. Gavin Raddoom, one of the 5 paladins of the first generation. Reginald Windsor, who would later become a marshal. Tom Seamus, who died in the original history but would definitely be one of the first to become a marshal after his resurrection. Now, all the generals simultaneously took a step back. Their movements were neat as if they had practiced it countless times. Damn, even if they don't have the spirit of brotherhood, there should be a pattern, right? Duque's eyeballs almost popped out. There is still one who didn't retreat. Before Duque's joy subsided, he immediately realized that the guy was Queen Sylvanas. Sylvanas raised his long golden eyebrows. His face clearly said, "What does it have to do with me when you men compete in drinking? Master, you can celebrate in peace. I will be responsible for taking you back to the bedroom to ensure that you will not do anything that will violate the alliance's etiquette and Duke identity." The little maid Vanessa, who rushed over to follow the army this time, made a proper lady's bow. But why are there dozens of coiled ropes hanging around your waist? Once I'm drunk, you will tie me up like a dumpling, right? Oh, are you the master or am I the master? At this time, Kudrin's image began to enlarge infinitely in Duque's vision. It was already bigger than the dwarf's avatar. That was definitely a demon king's body size and pressure. Kudrin stood up, pulled out Duque's hand with a serious, lying expression, held it, and stuffed it into a huge wooden barrel-shaped wine glass. It was filled with fragrant wine. As the king of Wildhammers, I represent the 50,000 compatriots of the Eagle Nest Mountain to thank you. To the friendship between dwarves and humans, cheers. He said a lot of words of thanks, but it actually meant only one thing. You damn brat, drink it. He only said this sentence, but it was enough. The group of bastards behind him also raised their glasses, to the Alliance. Alliance my ass. In order to please the dwarves, I poured alcohol into the sweet fruit wine that the dwarves like to drink. Duque's face turned pale. What does it mean to be caught in one's own trap? If you don't seek death, Why do I have to seek death for no reason? When Duque raised his glass with a bitter face, the demon king of the wine table, Kudrin, said, "I'll drink first, you take your time, but remember to be fair." After that, Demon King Kudrin drank at least 500 milliliters of the so-called fruit wine with at least 50% alcohol in 3 seconds. Great. This is F** King Good Wine. Hell, what I drank before was simply horse piss. Duque was just a college student before he traveled to another world. He had never entered society, and he was not a table warrior who had experienced the test of alcohol. Although his body was not bad after traveling to another world, it was only average without special training. Suddenly, Duque had to face the demon King Kudrin. Duque wanted to cry. Duque secretly cried in his heart, "Why didn't I catch Lothar according to the original history? With Lothar as the scapegoat, it won't be my turn no matter what." Just as the wine entered his throat, a miracle happened. Chapter 349. The System Elf appeared. "Dear host, do you want to drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk? Nonsense. Do you have any good ideas? Physical ones. I can stimulate the growth of alcohol-dispelling enzymes in the host's body, making it harder for the host to get drunk. I can increase the host's alcohol tolerance by 5,000%, but at the cost of the host's stamina. Stop talking, let's do it." Less than 3 seconds after Kudrin finished his drink, Duke also finished his big cup with a gurgling sound. "Come on. Who's afraid of you?" Duque directly flipped the big cup over, and only a few drops of wine dripped down, indicating that he had drunk it all. For a moment, the crowd was in an uproar. Was Duque hiding his true colors? Or was he just acting rashly and showing his true colors later? Miss Ilyusha Barov looked at the huge wine barrel in confusion, as if she was tempted by the fragrance of the wine. Ilyusha waved her hand, and naturally, a dwarf maid helped to pour the wine. Ilyusha only took a small sip. At first, she felt that it was a little sweet, but in just a short minute, the overbearing alcohol spread from her stomach, and a warm current rose from her chest to her head. "God, what wine is this?" Ilyusha almost couldn't stand it. On the other side, when Kudrin saw that Duque didn't get drunk after 1 cup, the brute Hammer King was very unhappy. After all, he almost choked himself. He thought to himself, "You can drink so much even though you're a pretty boy? Then why did you pretend that you couldn't drink just now? I just don't like that you humans have so many tricks. If I don't get you drunk today, my surname isn't Brute Hammer. Come, let's drink to our heart's content." A barrel of wine, even if it was a small one, was at least 10 liters, and it was quickly finished by Kudrin and Duque. It was true that Kudrin was talented. Duke on the other side was equally unfathomable. Most of the people around him who were drinking with him were swaying left and right, and the few that didn't die fighting on the table were also a little drunk. However, the 2 fellows in the middle of the field swayed and did not fall. "Hey, Duque, don't you think we're going to stop like this?" Kudrin wiped the wine off his beard and accidentally rubbed it on his eyebrows. "Well, old man Kudrin, how about something more exciting?" Duque elegantly wiped his mouth with a napkin, then poked the tip of his nose with his finger. "Mixed wine? That's the inevitable second stage, it's not exciting." Kudrin raised his hand. "Bring me all the models on my military map. And my baby." Soon, a large number of Griffin Knight models were placed on the table. "From now on, I'll put in an additional squad of 8 Griffin Knights for every round. In exchange, you have to give me 10 more barrels of this wine." "No problem. I'm not done yet. From now on, we'll drink together." Each round had to be different from the previous one. "And we play dice." "What dice?" Seeing a dwarf servant bring a dice the size of a fist, Duque could not help but laugh. "Damn, should I say it's common for alcoholics in every world?" He saw that each side of the dice had different contents written on it. On it were the words, "as much as you want," 1 cup, 2 cups, and of course, the most terrifying one was the table clear. Now, there were at least 20 different kinds of wine on the table. At that moment, Duque's 100,000 alpacas were running wildly in his heart. He even wanted to die. 5,000% increase in alcohol-reducing enzyme sounded like a lot, but if he was weak, 5,000% was 50 times, and 50 times was only 250. 1 table clear was definitely enough to kill him. Hee, you can only drink 1 cup in each round, but drinking 1 cup is only considered as breaking even. You have to drink a different cup before you can throw the dice. The cup on the dice is what the opponent wants to drink. The opponent can only start their own round after they finish drinking. At that moment, Duque did not want to know anything. At that moment, he just wanted to make a phone call a mage to send a message to Lothar. If he died because of alcohol poisoning, would it be considered as a work injury? The cruel battle began. Duque attacked first. His face was dark, and after drinking 2 cups, Kudrin was only hit with as much as you want. This shameless brute hammer king actually only took a small sip in order to cheat him to drink. Wasting an opportunity would bring retribution. Kudrin attacked from the back and hit Duque with 5 cups. Seeing that the situation was not in his favor, Duque decisively cheated. He let the system elf control his muscles and threw a table clear at Kudrin. However, life with cheats did not need to be explained. Kudrin actually did not fall. He actually did not fall. After the wine on the table was refilled, he very shamelessly returned a table clear to Duque. Duque was defeated. Just a little bit more. Looking at the system notification that said, you still need 1% more alcohol before you will be completely drunk. Duke was stunned as he held on. He continued to cheat and returned another table clear. This time, the wine table demon Kudrin finally showed signs of not being able to hold on. He almost used all his strength to give Duque another cup. At that moment, the Alliance's wine table commander, Duke Marcus, with the most tragic expression, drank the cup of wine and then collapsed. The winner has been decided? Under the cheers of the brute hammer dwarves, Kudrin raised his cup high, but he could not drink even half a drop. At that moment, Kudrin seemed to be possessed by something. He loudly sang a majestic and lonely song. This body is the bone of wine. Blood infuses wine, heart is like a wine jar. Undefeated in countless wineries. Never retreating in defeat. Never had a confidant. I often stand alone on top of an empty wine barrel, drunk in lonely victories. Yet only nothingness is left. Then this body is destined to be born for wine, to fight for a drinking buddy. After singing, the cup in his hand fell to the ground. I declare, from today onwards, Duque is my brother. With that, the wine table demon Kudrin Wildhammer collapsed. He let out a thunderous snoring sound. It was actually a tie? Kudrin, who could single-handedly defeat an entire team of opponents in a drinking contest, was actually tied with the young human mage Duque. One could imagine that Duque's name would spread throughout the entire Eagle Nest Mountain in a single night. Yes, that's right. Duque led the army to save the Eagle Nest Mountain, but his name might not be known by everyone. But Duque defeated Kudrin at the wine table, so Duque's name was destined to spread throughout the dwarven world. The dwarves' worldview was so strange. Only those who could fight and drink the most would be famous. They found that no one was still standing at the guest and host seats. The aftermath teams from both sides came out to clean up the battlefield and pick up their respective corpses. A dwarven auntie who seemed to be Kudrin's wife threw Kudrin onto a small cart and pushed him away like she was about to dump garbage. Vanessa dragged Duque's leg and dragged him away like a dead dog. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.